GS Score welcomes all its viewers, and today in the continuation of our series for the discussion of this year mains 2022, we have today with us what you can say paper 3, and as you know, paper 3 will be divided into 3 parts: internal security, followed by of course environment, science, tech and other things, and then economics, right? So with this, I'll start with internal security. My name is RP Singh. So let's start without any delay. So if we see, there are 4 questions. I mean, if we understand this year, 4 questions from internal security. And before we go ahead discussing one to one, we can see that almost they are from all the possible topics which is given in the syllabus. For example, it is organized crime, a different topic in the syllabus. Maritime security, which is part of coastal security, coastal management kind of thing. Then cyber security, and then we have Naxalism. So the 4 main topics: organized crime, maritime security, cyber security and Naxalism, as the 4 prominent internal security challenges have been raised in this year's examination. So we can say overall it was kind of traditional, but the answer is never traditional, because we cannot just decide or conclude that only one keyword is actually the answer, because if we read the first question itself is discuss the types of organized crime and describe the linkages between terrorist and organized crime. So the most important part here is that how you or anybody who has written the mains has developed this linkages between terrorist and organized crime that exist at national and international level. So of course, majority of us can write what is organized crime and types of crimes in one paragraph or so, but with the example of the relationship, growing relationship between terrorist and organized crime, that's how the whole thing is the question. And relevant here, if you can remember 2 things: Sidhu Moosewala murder case. So if somebody has written this, because only after this particular murder in Punjab of the famous singer, this link in Indian security became apparent, because the way this crime was organized and implemented, the connection of this crime were found out by the security agencies from the organized criminal gangs in Canada, some terrorist organizations based in Canada, Pakistan, some Indian gangs and organized crimes and wannabe criminals here and there, and someone sitting in jail planning everything. So it was such a perfect cocktail of the growing linkages between terrorism and organized crime, which is the latest trend in internal security challenges for India. And as the student for this answer, you must have written the recent NIA raid at more than 80 places in India of majority of the criminal leaders lodged in jail or out of country, like Neeraj Bhawana gang, who is called kind of organized criminal gangs Dawood Ibrahim of Delhi. So with these 2-3 examples, you have to prove your answer. Writing it generally, okay, I presume that as the student it will be difficult for you to find out why this question here, though organized crime can come anytime. But this particular thing which is given in our question, that makes question totally a current affair question. Now we are left with how to structure this answer. First, what is organized crime? And answer is very clear: any crime which is done in a professional, organized, institutional manner, where the criminal only performs his action without any you can say, strictly believing into revenge or a criminal feeling, because it is the job, you are paid for that. So Dawood Ibrahim gang, for example, is the perfect example of organized crime in India. So and another feature of organized crime is that when some member dies or arrested, then other person can take the place. It is not like a Dakat gang of Malkhan Singh. Then when Malkhan Singh died, his gang was totally disrupted. No, it is not the person, but the post which is important. And therefore, only region in the organized crime is to earn money. To earn money, whatever way you want to earn money. So types of organized crime can be anything. But of course, since money is the primary motive, so organized crimes will be anywhere where a big money will be involved. For example, hawala, money laundering, betting, kidnapping, narco, means smuggling drugs, human trafficking, you know. So all these places, contract killing kind of thing, supari killings. So all these things are the different types of organized crimes that can be conducted. Now, recently what we have seen is that since 2001, September 11 attack on the US, there is international cooperation between different security agencies, intelligence agencies, and countries and groups on international terrorism, against money laundering laws, against organized criminal gangs. So it is becoming a bit more challenging these days for the organized criminal gangs and terrorist organizations both to conduct their affairs. So it was very logical that aftermath in last 10-15 years, that both organized criminal gangs and terrorists will unite, because terrorism has some political goals, organized crime has some local operational efficiency, and two together fulfilling needs of each other can actually reduce the burden, reduce the, you can say, risk, reduce the cost, and therefore it, you can say, it is the functional division of labor. Functional division of labor. So with this Sidhu Moosewala case there and recent NIA raid with the example, you can sufficiently prove that the growing link is because of XYG factors, which I have told already, and thus in India, as NIA said, NIA director said after the raid that we want to finally, with this massive raid on 80 infamous people of India, I want to break the backbone of growing link between organized crime and terrorism. And one thing I'll definitely add, if Sidhu Moosewala murder case and recent NIA raid, if we have not mentioned, then our answer could be generally superficial in nature. What is superficial answer? Superficial answer means you are writing everything right without giving a kind of fact, data, evidence to prove that your arguments are justified in a particular context of the current affairs or some latest event. So this question itself sounds traditional, but examples and the events which are there as the main part of this answer are not traditional, right? Okay. So with this model of the answer which we created, you can write that how and why these things are happening. Now go to the next. Next question is maritime security challenges in India. Half of the question done. So first one paragraph or maybe 1.5 paragraph you will have to deal with the maritime. Then second is discuss the organizational, technical and procedural initiatives taken to improve the maritime security. Okay, maritime security. So government policies of various kinds, what government has taken the policy to improve maritime security. Again, this part is factual in nature. In previous question, if you see, this was concept, this was fact. In this question again, concept, fact. If you deal here, initiatives को अगर आप factually 1 2 3 4 5 करके नहीं बताते तो बात अधूरी रह गई. That will not actually complete the entire answer. So let's go. What is maritime security? So maritime is something related with oceans. Ocean from security perspective deals with 2-3 things. Number one, coastal areas, land wala, and then shallow waters, which we call territorial waters, and then we go some kind of contiguous zone. Even if we include high oceans, deep blue sea, but we can take that because in maritime security everything is there. So maritime security challenges in India are, you can say, as diverse as it could be conceptually. Regions being a huge coastal line, inimical forces in both Bay of Bengal and Arabian Ocean, growing tendency of piracy, right? And you can say price rise, inflation, all those things, disruption of supply chain, cost of shipping increasing, cost of shipping insurance increasing, a future forward contract becoming very tough because of lack of availability of finance due to the rise in the dollar prices everywhere. All these things are challenge to your maritime security. Why I'm saying this? Because if we see very carefully, then within 5 kilometers of India's coast, more than, you can say, 14 to 15 crore Indian population lives within 5 kilometers of the coastal area. If we increase that area to around 25 to 30 kilometers within coastal area of India, the population goes to almost 35 to 40%. So coastal security is also a human security in terms of, if it is tsunami, natural disaster, then it is again a maritime security issue, because you have to be quite resilient in meeting the natural disasters for a great maritime security challenges. Challenges could be due to oil spills, ecological disasters. Challenges could be terrorist attack, because we understand very well that a 2008 Mumbai terror attack happened from the sea route. So that is again an eye-opening event in India's maritime security challenges, right? So maritime security challenges are both economic security, developmental, demographic, and all these challenges, because India is located in Indian Ocean in such a manner that whatever the maritime challenges will be there for any other country on the earth, India will always have the same kind of concerns. With the growing Indo-Pacific rivalry, with the growing Chinese thing, maritime security is becoming a whole lot of a new area of challenge for India. Because when your game is increasing, because see, the question is here, discuss the organizational, technical and procedural initiatives taken to improve. Now, what is the catch here in this answer for all of us? India has its own maritime security mechanism at place. We all know that. But due to the superior challenges, India alone is not properly in place without the friendly countries like US and Japan, friendly countries like Colombo Security Conclave. So here I'm not going into the IR, but when we talk about the organizational, you cannot understand the maritime organizational structure without the Colombo Security or Quad or other Indo-Pacific programs. India has a very deep relations with US, Japan, Australia, UAE on the maritime security. So therefore, domestic procedures you have to mention, of course, because if you can see in the hint, then a whole lot of domestic like Coast Guard, Coastal Police, Indian Navy, all these things. But then international cooperation एक पैराग्राफ लिखना ही है. And if we have missed to write international angle into this, then it will be not a very good idea. Very good idea, right? So UPSC is, see, एक चीज समझिए आप. When I'm dealing this question here, when question has already come 2 days back, it is very easy for me to go and research the best answers for this question. Will this solve your purpose? It will not solve. It will not solve, because from a student point of view, we have to see that I'm a very good student and suddenly I see this question in examination. Then so how far I can justify my answer? That is the goal. Goal is not to come here and write, oh, write this 10 facts you should have known. No, no, no. ऐसे UPSC नहीं होता भाई. Here point is, what can be a very good answer for above average student, and how should have thought, he should have thought or she should have thought while writing the answer. So here it is about the big picture, the structural requirements of the question which we need to fulfill, and this is how we should frame the answer instead of going into that, oh my god, so many organization name, places. Yes, we have to mention, but listing is not always a very good idea. Listing is not a very good idea, right? So with this situation, this maritime approach, IR wala angle, policy, institutions, 1 or 2 examples in each one of them, you can really solve the question very well, and you can end up by mentioning the Indo-Pacific and rising China, inimical forces, climate change, COVID-19, all this creating a super sensitive internal security challenge in what is called maritime security. Okay, 19. So what are the different elements of cyber security? Considering the challenges in cyber security, examine the extent to which India has developed comprehensive national cyber security strategy. Again, same thing. If we see carefully, this is conceptual and this is factual. So you have to tell, in 2020, India's first national cyber security strategy has been released. If we don't do this and write like a guesswork, what would be a cyber security strategy, let's write, it is called superficial answer. Very frankly, that will not give any substantial traction in the mains examination. So what is the elements of cyber security? That is the conceptual. If we start definition with what the CIA or American government has, they say the 3 elements of cyber security. One is accessibility, other is reliability, and second is availability. So accessibility, availability, reliability. Though if we develop this further, then we can find many elements of cyber security. Because let's take, for example, availability. When we talk about availability of IRCT websites, for example, then the point here is very simple, that no hacker can hack it. There should not be denial attack. Any customer who wants to check his ticket or records or transactions, they should be able to check. If we believe in reliability, then data security, network security, Then if we believe in the availability or other kind of things, app security these days are very important, because we have understood that government of India has banned so many Chinese apps. And recently RBI has also found, and a CBI inquiry is going on, when enforcement directorate is actually has raided multiple Chinese applications, and they are defrauding Indian customers and people by providing cheap money. Many suicides have happened, and if you know, Indian Chartered Accountancy of India has identified more than 200 chartered accountants who were actually helping the Chinese firms. So app security is also there. App security is also there. So the various elements of cyber security has to be mentioned one by one, or you can say another, you can do another thing. You mention all the elements in one paragraph and better explain one element in a bit detail in the another paragraph, because we know very well, given the space and everything, it is not possible for us to actually uh, 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 write in detail each and every elements of the cyber security, right? Now, comprehensive national cyber security, as I said, is the strategy which we have to follow. And in 2020, national cyber security was conceptualized by Data Security Council of India, DSCI, and focus areas of this strategy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll read one line from each of the objectives: large scale digitization of public services, supply chain security, critical information infrastructure protection, a digital payment, state level cyber security, and security of small and medium business. And at the end, you can mention that it was the product of the overall goals which has been envisaged by National Cyber Security Policy 2013. As India is growing very fast in digitalization, cyber security will be one of the elements of the future growth and development of India. So with this, a cyber security question you can complete. Okay, so Naxalism finally. Again, see, Naxalism is social, economic and developmental issue which everybody knows. Statement done. What is this? Statement complete. In this context, what is context? That Naxalism has social problem, economic problem and developmental problem. Discuss the emerging issues and suggest multi-layered strategy. What is multi-layered? Problem is social, economic, developmental. So strategy should be social, economic and developmental. Ho gaya multi-layered. Now here you have to mention one or two policy in each one of them with the name and facts. Question itself as a hint to tackle the menace of Naxalism, right? So any commission committee which has been made to investigate Naxalism, they all have said very clearly that Naxalism is a multi-pronged problem and multi-pronged approach we need for that, right? In this context, it is very important for us to see that if we see integrated action plan IAP, or if we see a samadhan, if we see police reform wala kind of thing, but security related expenditure, SRE schemes and all, good governance, dialogue, livelihood, decentralization, mobile tower communication, all these things have every aspirational district program of the current government. That is a very huge program. Kaushal Vikas Yojana, So we have so many schemes for areas affected by Naxalism in law enforcement, in developmental, in economic, in social, that the question itself is justified that Naxalism is a multi-layered problem, required a multi-level solution and patience. Requires patience. Because when any problem is rooted in historical factors, then only legal approach, law enforcement approach cannot be used to solve the issues. With 4 or 5 facts, name of 1 or 2 schemes, relation between multi-layered causes and multi-layered solution, you can always go positively. This is the way to tackle, and we have to be very effective, precise, and at the same time very patient dealing with the Naxalism. Center-state cooperation in countering all these things on socio-economic developmental front will be an additional point which is important in counter-Naxalist strategy of India, right? So this was primarily the internal security question. And again, I said aim is not for me to be here and tell you what exactly, because you have to think that as a student, when you see this question suddenly in the mains examination, what best can you do and how you should start thinking when you see a particular question, right? So with this approach, I tried to explain whatever the answers I think should be written for these questions.
Hello everyone, welcome to GS Core. We'll continue with our discussion of environment and ecology questions, right? So if we see the pattern of environment and ecology questions, then if we compare it with last year, that means 2021's mains examination, where questions were asked on topics like, let's say, the COP26 Glasgow, then there was a question related to WHO's revised guidelines related to air pollutants, and also there was a question related to One Sun, One World, One Grid initiative of India, right? So those were the questions of 2021's mains examination, and all these questions were related to, all those questions were related to current affairs. But if we see this year's paper, then there is a change in trend, and we can see the questions are asked from static portion. For example, this question. First question, each year a large amount of plant material, cellulose, is deposited on the surface of the planet. And what are the natural processes does it undergo? So this is pure static question, right? So it is pure static question. Similarly, the question on photochemical smog, its formation, effects, mitigation measures, and the Gothenburg Protocol of 1999. Again, they are, you can consider them as static part only, right? Because photochemical smog, at least first part of the question is static. Gothenburg Protocol, we can say, can be put under the current affairs, because as it was the older protocol, there must be some news related to it, and that's why they have asked this particular question related to Gothenburg Protocol, right? So again, this is, you can say, a static question. Next question is about global warming, its effects on the global climate, control measures to bring the levels of greenhouse gases down in the light of Kyoto Protocol of 1997. So again, this question was a static question, right? So this year we can see the change in trend of questions from last year, because last year, or you can say for last couple of years, because in 2020 there was a question related to draft EIA notifications of the government. So that was the current affairs question for that particular year, right? So that's why we can say that this year there is a change in trend as far as environment and ecology questions are concerned, because most of the questions are static in nature. Hardly you can see any current affairs aspect for those questions, right? And that's why it becomes important for us to study both. That means static portion, to revise the static portion that we have read for, let's say, prelims examination, and also be good with current affairs as well, right? So that is what the questions of environment and ecology, or the trend of environment and ecology for 2022's mains examination. Now if we start discussion of the questions, then firstly we'll discuss the first question, the question number 6 in the mains examination paper. right? So the question is related to each year a large amount of plant material, cellulose, is deposited on the surface of planet Earth. What are the natural processes this cellulose undergoes before yielding carbon dioxide, water, and other end products? Right? So the question was for 10 marks, 150 words. So the question is related to cellulose, a plant material. So how we can start this particular question? This question, as question is related to cellulose, which is a plant material, and we are supposed to discuss the natural processes that cellulose undergoes to produce carbon dioxide, water, and other end products, we can safely say that this question is related to the process of decomposition. Because decomposition, we know that one of the most important output of decomposition is carbon dioxide, right? And other end products are also generated as a result of decomposition, right? So we are supposed to discuss the processes that occurs during decomposition of this cellulose, right? So that is the overall idea of this particular question. So in the introductory part, we'll define what do we mean by cellulose, right? So cellulose are polysaccharides which are seen in plants' cell walls. Apart from plant cell walls, they are also present in number of algae, right? So basically it is the material associated with the cell wall of plants, right? So that is cellulose. So this cellulose is added to soil as, let's say, leaves fall, the stems and branches of plants fall, right? So as a result of that, cellulose is added to the earth's surface, right? So after that definition, we'll discuss this particular point. As a result of falling off leaves, naturally falling off branches, stems, cellulose is added to earth's surface. Fine. So that will be our introduction, where we have defined cellulose, and then we have talked about how cellulose is added to the earth's surface through the process of falling up of leaves, branches, stems, etc. Right? So that is introductory part. Now in the body part of the answer, we'll discuss the natural processes that this cellulose undergoes. Natural processes, right? Natural processes that cellulose undergoes. And these natural processes obviously leads to formation of carbon dioxide, water, and other end products, right? So that is the that will be the approach of our body. So first process that cellulose undergoes is fragmentation. It is fragmentation. So what happens in fragmentation? In fragmentation, various microbes like earthworms, etc., they reduce the cellulose into smaller fragments, right? So from large fragments or large part of, let's say, cellulose, it will be reduced to smaller fragments. So that is fragmentation process. Second process is catabolism. Catabolism, where the enzymes will be secreted to degrade or to reduce the fragments of cellulose into various end products, right? It may be in the form of organic or inorganic compounds, right? So through the process of catabolism, what happens? Breakage of fragments of cellulose into various organic and inorganic compounds. So that is the second stage. Third is leaching. Third is leaching. So what happens in the process of leaching? In the process of leaching, the water soluble compounds formed during catabolism will be seeped inside the ground, right? So that will be leached away. Those compounds will be leached away as a process of leaching, right? So that is the third process. Next is humification. Humification, right? So in this stage, humus will be formed, which is a dark amorphous compound. Humus will be formed, and this humus gives various soils dark color, or we can say that it is the organic material in various soils. So that is the process of humification, and this humus further undergoes the process of mineralization. Further undergoes the process of mineralization, right? So through the process of mineralization, humus will be reduced to various minerals, and this process, mineralization process, it takes long time because humus is not easily degraded. It cannot be easily decomposed further, and that's why mineralization process, which leads to formation of various minerals, takes time, right? So these are some natural processes that this cellulose undergoes when it is added to the surface of planet Earth, right? Apart from these processes, there are certain other processes as well. For example, it also undergoes the process of, or it is also part of forest fires. It is also a part of forest fires. So forest fires also leads to burning up of this cellulose, and that in turn adds various compounds like various materials or gases like carbon dioxide and other end products, right? So that is the second process that this cellulose undergoes, right? And next is digestive pathways. Digestive pathways. So what happens in digestive pathways? In digestive pathways, this cellulose which falls on the earth's surface will be taken up by various herbivores, right? And these herbivores then will be using that cellulose as a source of their food, which in turn undergoes the process of anaerobic respiration inside the gut of these herbivorous animals, and thus that leads to addition of methane as well. Similarly, one more process occurs under digestive pathway is of excretion by these herbivorous animals. As these herbivorous animals are taking cellulose, it is eventually excreted from their body, and that excreta of these herbivorous animals further undergoes the process of decomposition, right? So all these processes are involved in the reduction of cellulose added to the plant surface, which ultimately leads to production of carbon dioxide, water, and other end products, right? So that we should talk about in the body part. Now in the conclusion, there is a need to highlight the importance of the cellulose, or importance of the protection of cellulose, right? So it would be difficult for us to control all these processes, right? Because these are natural processes, and that's why we won't be able to control them, right? But we can control, let's say, the instances of forest fires, and also we can make sure that the animal husbandry which is carried out at commercial level becomes sustainable. Because if we ensure there are lesser instances of forest fire, there is sustainable animal husbandry, then we can ensure that the emission of carbon dioxide and other compounds, including methane, will reduce from the cellulose, because that leads to addition of more and more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So if we are able to ensure reduction in the instances of forest fires as well as sustainable animal husbandry, then cellulose will be protected, will be conserved, and thus addition of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere will be reduced. So that will be our conclusion. In the context of environment, we can conclude that way, right? So that should be the approach for this particular question number 6, related to cellulose, right? Now let us move to the next question. Next question is related to photochemical smog. So question is, discuss in detail the photochemical smog, emphasizing its formation, effects, and mitigation, right? So that is the first part of the question, where we are supposed to discuss about the photochemical smog, followed by explain the 1999 Gothenburg Protocol. And again, this question is 10 marker question. That means we are supposed to address this question in 150 words only, right? So again, we'll directly hit the bullseye by writing what do we mean by photochemical smog in the introduction itself, right? So what is photochemical smog, that we will write in introduction. So what is photochemical smog? Photochemical smog is a mixture of pollutants. It is a mixture of pollutants which primarily includes ozone and peroxyacetyl nitrate, PAN, right? So it primarily includes ozone and PAN, right? So this photochemical smog, it is also known as summer smog. Why it is known as summer smog? Because it leads to formation of these pollutants, especially ozone, at ground level in the presence of sunlight, and that's why it is also known as summer smog, right? So that will be the introduction. Now in the body part, we'll take the aspects asked in a question one by one. Firstly, formation. Right, so what leads to formation of photochemical smog? Photochemical smog is the result of formation or is the result of reaction between, it is the result of reaction between nitrous oxide and VOCs, that means volatile organic compounds, right? So these two are the raw materials for the formation of photochemical smog. In addition to this, there is also a need of sunlight. That means the reaction between nitrous oxide and VOCs occur in the presence of sunlight, and that leads to formation of the photochemical smog. For example, the reactions are like, firstly, nitrous oxide will react with VOC. Nitrous oxide will react with volatile organic compounds in the presence of sunlight, leading to formation of nitrogen dioxide, right? So that will be the first stage of formation. In the second stage, this nitrogen dioxide will be splitted by UV radiations, or intense sun rays to produce nitrous oxide and atomic oxygen. Right? So this oxygen reacts with the molecule of oxygen to form ozone. So that is how ozone is formed as a result of the reaction between nitrous oxide and VOCs, right? Similarly, this nitrogen dioxide also reacts with VOCs to form peroxyacetyl nitrate in the presence of sunlight, right? So all these reactions occur when the photochemical smog, which primarily includes ozone and peroxyacetyl nitrate, are formed, right? So these are the reactions, or that is the process of formation of photochemical smog, right? So that is the first part of the question, where we have discussed the formation of photochemical smog. Next, second part of the question is effects. So what are the effects of photochemical smog, right? So again, effects will be, or effects we can write in two ways. Firstly, effects on human beings. Secondly, effects on other aspects of life, or let's say environment, and one more we may add, and that is other impacts or other effects, right? So effects can be written in these three ways: effects on human beings, effects on other aspects of environment, and the other impacts of photochemical smog. So as primarily this photochemical smog is an air pollutant, we can say that there will be impact on the respiratory system of human beings, right? So various diseases related to respiratory respiratory system, like asthma will be aggravated, then there will be inflammation of lungs, then respiratory tracts will get irritations because of the prolonged exposure to photochemical smog. Also, the lung functions may be affected, and that may lead to, let's say, diseases like lung fibrosis, right? So all those are the impacts on human beings. Secondly, impact is also there on environment. That means impact is also there on plants, right? So the ability of plants to produce and store food is affected because of the exposure to photochemical smog, and that is why it is one of the most important factors that may reduce the efficiency, the potential growth of plants will be reduced as a result of photochemical smog, and that will have its impact not only in the context of carbon sink, because trees, if they are not able to achieve their potential growth, that will affect the carbon sink throughout the world, but also there will be impact on the productivity of crops, which will put a question mark on food security, right? So all these aspects we can write in the impact on environment. Apart from impact on environment, there are other impacts as well. For example, there will be corrosion of metals, corrosion or there will be breakage in the rubbers, like let's say the rubbers of tires of cars or other vehicles may break as a result of prolonged exposure to photochemical smog, right? So all those effects we can write in the second part of the body. Now in the third part, we are supposed to discuss the measures of mitigation, how we can reduce the impact of photochemical smog. So if we want to have impact on the or if we want to reduce the emission or formation of photochemical smog, then we'll have to target its sources, right? So what are the sources of photochemical smog? Sources are nitrous oxide and volatile organic compounds, right? So this photochemical smog being a secondary pollutant, we cannot directly address photochemical smog, and that's why we'll have to address such primary pollutants which are leading to formation of photochemical smog, and those primary pollutants are nitrous oxide and volatile organic compounds, right? So what are the sources of nitrous oxide? Primarily two sources. First is emission from vehicles as well as industries, right? Also, second important source of nitrous oxide is fertilizer industries or use of excessive amount of fertilizers in agriculture. So these two are the major factors where we'll have to take certain actions to reduce the emission of nitrous oxide. And if nitrous oxide is emitted in lesser amount, obviously there will be reduction in the quantity or reduction in the formation of photochemical smog, right? So that is the first way how we can reduce the photochemical smog. Second, VOCs, volatile organic compounds. So what are the prime sources of volatile organic compounds? The prime sources of VOCs are the modern day lifestyle. For example, we use various paints, polishes, we use aerosol particles, right? So all those, we use adhesives, right? So all those modern day products lead to emission of VOCs. Fine. So if we are able to reduce the use of VOCs in all these modern day products, then we'll have reduction in the emission of VOCs as well, right? So that is how we'll be able to reduce the emissions of VOCs, which is a raw material for the formation of photochemical smog, right? So both these steps, that means reduction in the emission of nitrous oxide through industries, vehicles, as well as from fertilizers, and reduction in the emission of VOCs from modern day lifestyle can help us mitigate the impact of photochemical smog, right? So that should be the approach for the third part of the body, right? Now, in the next part of the question, they have asked about the 1999 Gothenburg Protocol. And this is very typical part that they have asked. It is very specific, and that makes this particular question difficult, right? First part is easier. One can write about the first part, but Gothenburg Protocol of 1999, it is difficult to write because in many standard sources this protocol is not there, right? So next part is Gothenburg Protocol, right? So Gothenburg Protocol came into being in 1999, and it is a protocol related to acidification, eutrophication, and ground level ozone, right? So ground level ozone, which is one of the components of photochemical smog, this Gothenburg Protocol is trying to address that particular problem of ground level ozone, right? So what are the important aspects related to Gothenburg Protocol? It is a protocol which is trying to put ceilings on the emissions of oxides of nitrogen, then oxides of nitrogen, VOCs, then ammonia, and also sulfur dioxide, right? So these are the pollutants which are targeted by Gothenburg Protocol, right? So what are the ceilings for NOx, that means oxides of nitrogen, and VOCs? It is approximately 40%. There should be 40% reduction in the emissions of oxides of nitrogen and VOCs compared to 1990s level. For ammonia, emissions are 17%, and for sulfur dioxide, it is 63%. Right? So that is what is the ceiling put by Gothenburg Protocol on the emission of nitrous compounds of oxides of nitrogen, VOCs, ammonia, and sulfur dioxide, right? So this is the protocol which is launched by United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, right? So that is Gothenburg Protocol, and that is about the body part of this particular question. Now in the conclusion, what we can write? Conclusion. Right, so again we can highlight the threats that photochemical smog poses, and that's why the need to reduce the emission of photochemical smog by addressing the problems of emission of nitrous oxide and VOCs. We can highlight these steps and what actions the government has taken, especially the government of India has taken for the reduction in the emission of VOCs. Right, so those steps we can highlight in the conclusion of this particular answer. Right, so that should be the approach for question number 7 related to photochemical smog. Next now. Next question is question number 17. Discuss global warming and mention its effects on the global climate. Right, so discuss global warming and mention its effects on global climate. Explain the control measures to bring down the level of greenhouse gases which causes global warming in the light of the Kyoto Protocol 1997. Right, so this question is of 250 marks. That means it is a 15 marker question. Fine. So the question is related to global warming. What are its effects? What are the control measures for controlling the emission of greenhouse gases in the context of Kyoto Protocol 1997? Right. So in the first part, that means in the introductory part, we'll directly discuss about global warming. Right. So what do we mean by global warming? So global warming is the prolonged increase in the temperature of Earth, right, which is primarily seen after industrial revolution, especially in last 40 years. And that is the result of emission of various greenhouse gases by human activities which have accumulated in the Earth's atmosphere, leading to trapping up of more heat radiations coming from the Earth's surface. Right, so that is what is global warming. It is prolonged increase in the temperature of the Earth's surface, and that is primarily the result of human actions, especially human actions after industrial revolution, especially in last 40 years, and those human actions are related to emission of various greenhouse gases, right? So global warming, so that will be the first part of the question, that means introductory part. Also we can write about greenhouse effect, right? So global warming has intensified because of the intensification of the natural phenomenon called as greenhouse effect. So what is greenhouse effect? Greenhouse effect is a natural phenomenon which makes Earth livable. So how that happens? So there are certain gases present in the Earth's atmosphere which are naturally present in the Earth's atmosphere, like methane, carbon dioxide, then water vapor. These gases are called as greenhouse gases. These greenhouse gases are transparent to solar radiation, short wave solar radiations, right? But they are opaque to long wave terrestrial radiations. That means they trap those long wave terrestrial radiations from the Earth's surface, and that's why there is livable temperature on the Earth's surface, right? So that is greenhouse effect. But what has happened because of human activities? Because of human activities, there is intensification of this greenhouse effect as we are putting more and more greenhouse gases with the burning up of fossil fuels, right? So that has ultimately led to global warming. Fine. So that will be the introductory part of this question. In the next part, we'll mention its effects, right? So in the body part, we'll discuss about the effects of global warming, and there are many effects of global warming that we can write. So what are the major effects of global warming? Firstly, there is change in the climatic patterns throughout the world. Changes in the climatic pattern, that is the first impact of global warming. Secondly, we can say that erratic rainfall patterns are seen throughout the world. Thirdly, there is retreat of glaciers, which in turn leads to addition of more water to oceans and seas, leading to rise in sea level. That is the third impact. Next, we can also write about the intensification of cyclonic conditions in various oceans, especially in the tropical region, and that has not only intensified cyclones, but their frequency has also increased because of global warming, right? Next, fifth impact, we can write about the prolonged heat wave conditions. They are not only prolonged, but their occurrence has increased, their frequency has also increased, right? So all these effects we can write related to global warming, and furthermore we can write the effects of global warming on human beings. For example, there is loss of crop productivity of agriculture has reduced. Secondly, there is impact on human health. Water resources have depleted. There are impacts on various ecosystems, like let's say Himalayan ecosystem. There is impact even on coastal ecosystem, where we are witnessing the increased onslaught of cyclonic surges, right? So all those points, and also the effect of global warming on various other aspects of life. That means there are different species which are threatened because of global warming. For example, you may cite the example of Bamble K. melomies, which went extinct because of increased global warming. Also, the productivity of forest has reduced. Crops or plants are not able to attain their potential growth because of global warming. There is increased land degradation because of global warming. All these effects we can write about the body part, first part, or in the first part of the body, right? So that is the effects of global warming on the global climate. Next, we are supposed to discuss, so that was the first part of the body. In the second part of the body, we are supposed to discuss control measures in the context of Kyoto Protocol, right? So control measures that have been taken to bring down the levels of GHGs, which caused global warming in the context of Kyoto Protocol, right? So what is Kyoto Protocol? Kyoto Protocol is one of the important protocols under UNFCCC, which came into being in COP3 of UNFCCC. And this Kyoto Protocol primarily targets 6 greenhouse gases. It primarily targets 6 greenhouse gases, and they are CO2, methane, then perfluorocarbons, hydrofluorocarbons, sulfur hexafluoride, and nitrous oxide, right? So these are the greenhouse gases which are targeted by Kyoto Protocol, right? So it primarily focuses on the reduction in the emission of these gases. And what is the mechanism through which the reduction of these greenhouse gases will be ensured? It will be ensured through a principle of CBDR, common but differentiated responsibility, where the responsibility bestowed with developed countries, right? So it is the developed countries will have to ensure that there is reduction in the emissions of greenhouse gases. So what is the amount that they must reduce? So in the first phase of Kyoto Protocol, that means from 2008 to 2012, they should reduce the emissions of these gases by 5% of 1990s level. And in the second phase, that means between 2013 to 2020, emission should reduce by 18% of 1990s level, right? So that is a major step taken under Kyoto Protocol to control the emissions of these 6 greenhouse gases that Kyoto Protocol targets. And to achieve this, there is a flexible mechanism mentioned in the Kyoto Protocol which can be used by developed countries, and that is in the form of clean development mechanism, joint implementation, and international emissions trading, right? So all these efforts are taken in the Kyoto Protocol, where prime responsibility lies with developed countries to control the emissions of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, methane, fluorinated gases like PFCs, HFCs, SF6, and nitrous oxide, right? So that way we can address the second part of the body related to control measures in the context of Kyoto Protocol, right? So that will be the body part. Now in the conclusion, we can highlight the failure of Kyoto Protocol and why we have accepted Paris deal, right? So Kyoto Protocol could not achieve its targets, and that's why in COP21 at Paris Climate Agreement was signed, where responsibility of mitigation of climate change is not only with developed countries but also with developing countries, because that means developing countries along with developed countries have to come up with NDCs, nationally determined contributions. So there is a need to ensure that these NDCs are implemented on ground, so that Paris Climate Deal, which is considered as a successor of Kyoto Protocol, can achieve its target of maintaining temperature rise between 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius by 2100, right? So that should be the conclusion of our answer, right? So that is about the questions related to environment and ecology. Fine. Now next we'll be discussing about the questions from science and technology. So what is the trend of questions in science and technology? So if we compare the questions of science and technology of 2022's mains examination with, let's say, earlier examinations, then we can say that this year focus is completely shifted towards current affairs, right? Because in the last years, in the last year there was a question related to S400 Triumph, right? So that question was asked because S400 Triumph was in news, right? So that was one of the questions of 21's mains examination. But if we consider other questions, then the question was related to blue LEDs. The earlier questions were related to nanotechnology, biotechnology, right? So this year you can see that there is a break from static questions. Both the questions that UPSC has asked related to science and technology are current in nature. They are current oriented questions, right? So the first question is related to James Webb Space Telescope, which was launched on 25th of December 2021. And the second question is related to the basic principle behind vaccine development, right? So vaccines, we know that vaccines were in news in the context of COVID-19 vaccination, and that's why UPSC has asked this particular question. So both these questions are current related or current oriented questions. Fine, right? But for the second question of vaccine, they have asked the basic principle of vaccine development, right? So fine, means we can say that because of the vaccines or because of the topics related to vaccines, one must have read the basic principle behind the vaccine development in the current affairs as well, right? Though it is a static part, though the basic principle related to vaccine development is static part, but as vaccines were in news, one must have read that particular part even in current affairs, right? So these two questions we'll be discussing, and they have current orientation. So let us discuss the first question. So first question is question number 15. Launched on 25th December 2021, James Webb Space Telescope has been much in news since then. What are its unique features which makes it superior to its predecessor space telescopes? What are the key goals of this mission? What potential benefits does it hold for the human race? Right, so 250 words. This question was of 250 words. That means it is the question of 15 markers, right? So firstly, in the body part, in the introductory part, we'll talk about James Webb Space Telescope. What is James Webb Space Telescope? James Webb Space Telescope is an infrared observatory. It is an infrared observatory, right? So, which was launched by NASA, European Space Agency, and Canadian Space Agency. So these three have launched James Webb Space Telescope, and where it is put? It is put at the Lagrange point 2. Lagrange point 2 is the point where this James Webb Space Telescope is put, which is approximately 1.6 million kilometers away from the Earth, right? So that we can write in the introduction, where we have highlighted that James Webb Space Telescope is an infrared observatory, right? So that makes it superior than the earlier telescopes that we have launched for the observation of universe. Fine. So James Webb Space Telescope, as it is an infrared observatory, it can provide us the information about the earliest stars, and also it can look back into universe than its predecessor. That means, let's say the Hubble Space Telescope, which is the predecessor of James Webb Space Telescope, can look into, let's say, certain time period, but James Webb Space Telescope can go beyond that time period. That means it can look into the universe, into the past universe, which is far better than the look of Hubble Space Telescope, right? So that will be the introductory part of this question. Now in the body part of the question, we'll write about the unique features of James Webb Space Telescope. Unique features. So what are the unique features of James Webb Space Telescopes which are superior to its predecessor space telescopes, right? So the most important predecessor space telescope of JWST is Hubble Space Telescope. So primarily we'll focus on the differences or what is superior in the JWST, that means James Webb Space Telescope. So the most important aspect which is superior than the Hubble Space Telescope is size of mirrors. Size of mirrors. So why size of mirrors is important? In James Webb Space Telescope, size of mirrors is around 6.5 meters, 6.5 meters in diameter, which is far greater than, or which is almost 3 times greater than Hubble Space Telescope's mirrors, which is almost 2.4 meter in diameter, right? So that is the diameter of Hubble Space Telescope mirrors, right? So clearly there is more diameter, more size of mirrors in James Webb Space Telescope. So what is the significance of this? Significance of this is that as the size of mirrors in James Webb Space Telescope is more, the collecting area of various infrared radiations coming from the other parts of universe will be more. So more the size of mirror, more will be the collecting area, and that's why James Webb Space Telescope is superior than Hubble Space Telescope. That is first, right? Second is the wavelength used, the wavelength on which James Webb Space Telescope works, right? So James Webb Space Telescope, as we have already referred to, it is an infrared observatory. That means it will detect the infrared part of the electromagnetic spectrum, which is better than the detection of Hubble Space Telescope, because Hubble Space Telescope is related to detection of optical and UV radiations, right? So that is also the difference between the, or that is also the aspect which makes James Webb Space Telescope superior than Hubble Space Telescope. James Webb is infrared observatory. On the other hand, Hubble Space Telescope is UV radiation or optical radiations observatory. So what makes this particular aspect better? So as James Webb Space Telescope is infrared observatory, it will be able to study first formed galaxies and exoplanets. The first formed galaxies in the universe as well as exoplanets can be studied by James Webb Space Telescope because it is catching or it is collecting infrared radiations, right? So that is the second aspect which makes it better than its predecessor. Third aspect is of distance. Third aspect is of distance. We know that James Webb Space Telescope is launched at Lagrange point 2. James Webb Space Telescope is at L2, Lagrange point 2. And Hubble Space Telescope is in low Earth orbit. It is in low Earth orbit. And that's why JWST will be able to see the baby galaxies. It will be able to see the baby galaxies. On the other hand, Hubble Space Telescope, which is there in low Earth orbit, can only see toddler galaxies, right? So that is also the significance of James Webb Space Telescope. Fine. Next aspect is related to the various devices or various instruments used in the James Webb Space Telescope. And the most important instrument apart from mirror used in James Webb Space Telescope is sunshield membrane coatings. It is sunshield membrane coatings, right? So why this is significant? Why this sunshield membrane coatings are significant in James Webb Space Telescope? Because firstly, it is at L2. It is at L2 point. That means it is closer to the sun. Secondly, as it is infrared radiation observatory, infrared radiations are in the form of heat energy. So it is very important to ensure that the James Webb Space Telescope is not disturbed by radiations from other sources, like let's say sun, or even from the reflections of sun rays from moon or earth. And also it is important to ensure that the components, its own components, are kept at lower temperatures, so that there is no disturbance in the collection of infrared radiations, which are nothing but the heat energy, or which is nothing but heat energy, right? So that's why this sun shield membrane coating is used, which not only protects it from the sun rays coming from sun, also it protects the instruments which may disturb the collection of infrared radiation, right? So all these features we can discuss as a part of unique features of JWST over its predecessors, primarily Hubble Space Telescope, right? So that is the first part of the body. Now in the second part of the body, we are supposed to discuss key goals of James Webb Space Telescope. So for what purpose we have launched James Webb Space Telescope? As we have already discussed, it is launched to observe first star formation and exoplanets. That is the first goal, to observe first star formed after Big Bang, and to observe exoplanets. Also, it will try to understand the assembling of galaxies, how galaxies have assembled. So understanding the assembling of galaxies. That is also the scientific goal of James Webb Space Telescope. Fine. So that is an important aspect. Next, as James Webb Space Telescope is an infrared observatory, it can penetrate the cloud of dust, and that's why it can also observe the stars and planetary systems which are being born beyond that cloud of dust, right? So it can also study stars beyond the dust cloud, which is not possible for HST, which is Hubble Space Telescope. Beyond dust clouds, right? So that is one of the important goals of the James Webb Space Telescope. Again, fourth scientific goal of James Webb Space Telescope is to look for extraterrestrial life, if any. To look for extraterrestrial life, right? So all these are the important goals of James Webb Space Telescope. And apart from all these goals, which are related to, let's say, other parts of the universe, it will also study our own solar system. Our own solar system will also be studied by the James Webb Space Telescope, right? So all these are the key goals of James Webb Space Telescope. And last part of this question is the potential benefits. Right? So what are the potential benefits of James Webb Space Telescope? The most important potential benefit of James Webb Space Telescope is that we'll be able to look in the events which have happened after Big Bang, right? And that will help us confirm whether Big Bang has occurred or not, right? So it will help us to solve various mysteries related to the universe, right? So it will solve various mysteries. Moreover, it will also help us study whether there is any life apart from human beings in the universe. Is there any life in the other solar systems, in the other parts of universe? That also will be able to study, and that question will also be able to resolve with the help of James Webb Space Telescope. So in nutshell, we can say that the potential benefits are in the form of increasing the reach of knowledge, increasing the horizons of knowledge of human beings, with the help of infrared observatory called as James Webb Space Telescope, right? So that is about the body part of the question. Now in the conclusion will again summarize the benefits of JWST, and then we can say that there is also a need for ISRO and other space agencies to collaborate to understand or to get data from James Webb Space Telescope, to use that data for various research purposes, and thereby again that will help us in the increasing the that will help us in expanding research and development in space science as far as India is concerned, right? So that way we can conclude this particular answer. Fine. So that is the question number 15 related to James Webb Space Telescope, and last question is related to vaccines. Last question is related to vaccines. So question is, what is the basic principle behind vaccine development? How does vaccines work? What approaches were adopted by Indian vaccine manufacturers to produce COVID vaccines, right? So the question is related to vaccines. So firstly, in the introductory part, we can define vaccines. So what are vaccines? Vaccines are the products which are used to induce immune system in human beings so that they are taught about the infection that may occur in future, right? So that is the importance of vaccines. That is the definition of vaccines, and we have used vaccines to control various pandemics, and we can say that that is true even in the case of COVID-19, right? So that way we can introduce this particular answer by writing the definition of vaccines. Fine. So that is first point. Next, in the body part, we are supposed to discuss basic principle behind the vaccines. Basic principle. So what is the basic principle behind the vaccine development? Basic principle behind the vaccine development is to teach immune system of, let's say, human beings about the probable infection in future, so that immune system knows what kind of response it is supposed to produce in a fast manner in future in case that infection occurs, right? So that is the basic principle behind the development of vaccines. Now next part is how do vaccines work? How vaccines work? So how vaccines work? So firstly, let's say the weakened form of antigen will be introduced in the body of human beings, which is nothing but vaccines, right? So as that antigen is introduced in the body of human beings, that will be detected by our immune system as a foreign material, and as it is a foreign material, our immune system will produce response against that foreign material. But we have weakened that antigen, and that's why the response produced by our immune system will not be violent response, and that's why during vaccines there will not be instances of cytokine storms, which in turn may lead to organ failure. So such kind of instances will not be there in vaccine, because what we are introducing weakened form of antigen, right? So as this weakened form of antigen is detected by our immune system, next stage will be to produce a controlled immune response against the antigen, right? So that is the basic work or that is the work, these are the steps through which vaccines work. Now as the immune system has produced the response against the antigen, let's say in future similar kind of infection occurs naturally. In that case, our immune system will be aware of what kind of response it is supposed to produce for that particular infection, because it has already taught by vaccines what kind of response it is supposed to produce, right? So that is how vaccines work. So that is the second part of the body. In the third part of the body, we are supposed to discuss approaches. What are the approaches? What are the approaches used by Indian vaccine manufacturers to produce COVID-19 vaccine? So the prime approaches that are followed by Indian vaccine manufacturers, for example, for Covaxin, which was manufactured by Bharat Biotech, the Covaxin is inactivated viral vaccine. Inactivated viral vaccine, where we have used inactivated SARS-CoV-2 to produce Covaxin, right? So it is inactivated viral vaccine where we have used SARS-CoV-2 itself, but in the inactivated form, so that when we introduce that SARS-CoV-2 in the form of vaccines in the bodies of human beings, it does not lead to actual infection, right? So that is the approach followed by for the development of Covaxin by Bharat Biotech. Next is Covishield. Covishield, which is produced by Serum Institute of India, right? So it is the development by AstraZeneca, Oxford AstraZeneca, and it uses chimpanzee adenovirus, right? So chimpanzee adenovirus is used. Along with that, we add the protein related to SARS-CoV-2, right? So the protein related to SARS-CoV-2 is added along with the chimpanzee adenovirus to produce the immune response in the bodies of human beings which are taken the shots of, which have been given the shots of Covishield, right? So that is the development approach for Covaxin and Covishield. Fine. So that is about the body part of the answer, and then in the conclusion, we can highlight the need of vaccines, especially in the context of increasing zoonotic diseases, right? For example, not only for human beings but also for animals. We can say that the lumpy skin disease or the lumpy skin disease virus, which is creating havoc in country and which is a disease related to animals, that also should be tackled with the help of vaccines. And that's why we can highlight the importance of vaccines to address various kinds of pandemics, not only related to human beings but also related to animals, because their instances have increased because we human beings are going closer to, let's say, the wildlife, and that is leading to accidental jump of these zoonotic viruses in human beings. And that's why there is a need to increase research and development related to vaccine development. Fine. So that is about the questions related to science and technology as well as environment and ecology. Fine. So that is the general approach for these questions. Now, next part will be related to economy.
Hello students. So I am Gaurav Bansal, and now we are going to discuss the questions on the Indian economy. So just give me 1 minute for settling down before we can start our discussion. Just give me 1 minute, please. Okay, students, so let us start looking at questions one by one. So the question number 1 this year was, what is public-private partnership, PPP? Okay, why is public-private partnership required in the infrastructural projects? Examine the role of PPP model in the redevelopment of railway stations. So, first of all, before we start talking about the answer, let us understand the context of the question. So, why we need PPP? And the criticism regarding private sector involvement, because there are people who have allegations that government has sold railways, government is selling everything. So basically the answer will also counter that kind of allegations also. So first aspect, we will just simply talk about the infrastructure. So the idea is that India requires almost a 5 times increase in its infrastructure spending in the next decade. And in 2017, we adopted a target of $2 trillion of spending. $2 trillion of spending on infrastructure in the next 5 years, which would translate into $400 billion per year. Our actual spending in infrastructure is nowhere close to this $400 billion. We are spending somewhere between 150 to $200 billion. That's how much we are spending on the infrastructure, because it is a 5-year period. So we do not have a single number, we have a range that we have spent around 150 to $200 billion per year. This is less than half of what we require. So this is the background. Now, in the answer, how do you start? In the answer, you have to start with, first of all, the need for infrastructure. Okay? You should start talking about why we need infrastructure. Because infrastructure is not just a sector in itself. Infrastructure is a super sector. It is a sector which supports all other sectors. It is a sector which generates positive externalities. Positive externalities for other sectors. Okay. What are positive externalities? That it reduces their cost, it improves their productivity. So naturally, if our ports are better, if our roads are better, if our infrastructure is better, then it reduces the cost of all other businesses. It improves their efficiency, it reduces the transportation time. So it improves upon so many different aspects. So your introductions should be on that aspect. Then once your introduction is complete, then you should start talking about the need for spending in infrastructure. So your first point is this. Okay, your introduction, and then amount to be spent in infrastructure. So then you talk about this aspect, that we need to spend almost $2 trillion every 5 years, and this amount will increase over time. We are spending less than half of our requirement. In order to double up infrastructure spending, we cannot completely rely upon government. The government has a significant budget constraint. Government has a very limited spending potential. And because of all of that, the spending on infrastructure is not adequate. So for example, our budget is largely spent on committed expenditures. Almost 1/3 of our entire expenditure is just on making the interest payment on the total debt. And almost 2/3 of the total budget goes towards salaries and payments, defense and other committed expenditures. Only 1/3 of expenditure is available for welfare or development. And that is why we are not able to increase this significantly. So given this constraint, it is private sector which must pitch in. Okay, so by this time your half of answer would be ready. Why public-private partnership is required in infrastructure projects. Then you come to the second part, examine the role of PPP model in redevelopment of railway stations in India. Before getting into the very specific aspect of railway station, which is quite easy to talk about, you should talk about that Bibek Debroy committee. You should give a reference to Bibek Debroy committee because it is a major committee on Indian railways and it did talk about PPP. If this committee had not discussed PPP, we were not unnecessarily included. But in this case, the committee has included it. So you have to talk about that. The Bibek Debroy committee has talked about the PPP in railways, that there is a need to involve public and private sector both in the development of railway further. And there are certain aspects regarding which it wanted private sector to gear up more, to involve itself more. So railway station is one of those aspects. Okay? Development of railway property, development of railway assets, or development of railway stations are certain aspects in which we should involve private sector. Now the idea is railway stations are not an earning asset or traditionally have not been viewed as an earning asset for railways. On average, there would be a very small earning from the railway station because there would be several shops and other licensed vendors in the railway premises. From those rent, etc., you can cover up small proportion of the overall cost on the maintenance of the railway station. So railway station gives you some revenue from rents, etc., from license fees, etc., or perhaps from some of the direct sale of platform tickets, etc., but those are negligible. So we have some rental income, but against that we also have a major development expenditure for railway, development and maintenance both in fact. So the approach is that railway station have been an area where we need to spend each year rather than earning from it. Now Bibek Debroy committee argued that we should not view the railway property or railway assets as a dead stock, as a stock on which we have a maintenance expenditure. Rather, we should make it a earning asset. So convert the railway capital into assets. How can we do so? That can be done by giving the contracts to private sector. Now private sector can develop the railway station properly, create more commercial space, create more retail space there, provide better services to the passengers through that development. Okay, and for the tender, it will pay to the government for the ownership of the railway station. So for a certain period of time, they get the rights to manage the railway station and they can open more retail space, they can commercialize the railway property, and they should also offer better services to people. There are certain aspects over which they have independent in independence in pricing. For example, let us say parking charges, but there are other aspects regarding which they do not have independence. So we have a semi-control over them. So this is the present model as per the Bibek Debroy committee. So we have given several railway stations on such lease agreements, or we have gone into PPP for management of such railway station. One of the most recent example was the Bhopal railway station. Okay, so there is one particular railway station in Bhopal, I think Habibganj railway station, that one particularly has been upgraded significantly. A large retail space has been converted, has been developed into the railway station from which the private sector will earn. And meanwhile, railway passengers can also access those services. They have better services and they do not have to pay extra for that. So if implemented properly, it is a win-win for both. That is the background. And in the answer, when you are writing, you have to talk about Bibek Debroy committee first, that in what context Bibek Debroy committee looked at the railway station redevelopment under PPP, and then talk about one or two present examples. And then you can come to the end, and as a conclusion, you can talk about some of the other aspects, that PPP is not just about railway station redevelopment. PPP aspects are far more wider. So far, railway has not involved in large number of PPP, and reason for that is lack of an independent regulator. At present, the disputes, in case there are any between the private developer and the railways, that would be tackled by the Ministry of Railway itself, and that is unfair. So Digestive Pathways committee also argued that for PPP to work properly in railways, we need independent regulators, and that is how you should, and ideally that the way forward would be to have independent regulators, so that the process can be more efficient, effective and transparent, and there is grievance readdressal mechanism built in. Okay. In between there are some issues also, so those issues are given in the hints that you can refer to. So for example, that the services that government provides, they are at a certain price. There are risks private sector may increase the cost, but on that government has control. Okay, private sector cannot completely increase the cost as per their whims and fancies, as per their, let us say, as per their own model. For that, it is a joint decision. Okay, and then there are hundreds of people who get employment at railway station or railway premises. Their livelihood, how it will be affected by the entry of private player, even that can be an issue of concern. Even that can be an issue of concern. So that also you should cover before writing the way forward. Okay, so that is how you should be covering the answer. Starting with the need for the infrastructure projects. Okay, why we need them, then what kind of spending do we need, then third part, that government is unable to spend that much. Fourth part, talking about the need for PPP in railways, you talk about Digestive Pathways committee, how it talked about railway station, then you talk about some of the recent example, and then certain issues and challenges, and then the way forward. That good enough 7-8 points are there, along that you should write the answer. So I hope this is quite clear. Now let us look at the next question, which is more interesting than the first. The second question is inclusive growth Excuse me for a minute, there seems to be some problem here. Just check this is not working. नहीं कर रहे. Okay. What are the major challenges of public distribution system, PDS, in India? How it can be made effective and transparent? I think this is question number 3. Sorry, my bad. Please excuse me for this. So, is inclusive growth possible under the market economy? State the significance of financial inclusion in achieving the economic growth in India. So, continuously for a third year, we have a question on inclusive growth. But this time the question is more tricky and more interesting. Is inclusive growth possible under market economy? So far we have been saying that inclusive growth is not automatic. Government has to intervene. Rather than government side, this time we are going to talk about the private sector side. Is it possible under the market economy? So first of all, in such a question, you should start with the inclusive growth. This question is straight on the inclusive growth itself. In the introduction part, you can talk about inclusive growth itself. That very briefly, what is inclusive growth? This approach is not always a best approach for introduction, defining the key term of the question, but in this case, this would be a nice introduction. So this is dependent on case-to-case basis. You have to pick it up as per the question. What is inclusive growth? growth which benefits the wider sections of society, growth which includes those who are typically disadvantaged. Who are disadvantaged? Who are at risk of not getting the benefits of growth? Okay, so for example, disabled or specially abled or specially abled, okay, women, children, old people. Okay, sometimes it can be urban rural divide also, so rural people. Okay, it can be certain backward classes. So it can be along the lines of caste, religion, etc. That certain class or section of society is not getting the benefits. So what is inclusive growth? Which includes those section in the fruits of growth that are typically disadvantaged. For example, specially abled, women, children, old people, etc. It is a major challenge for the modern economies to ensure that growth is inclusive growth. Okay. Now, even private sector can also create inclusive growth. It is not just a challenge for government. Today, maximum jobs are created by the market economy, by the private sector. And private sector accounts for the bulk of the economy. So this is not responsibility or prerogative of government alone. We must create our policy framework in such a way, we must develop the economy in such a way that even market economy contributes to the inclusive growth. Okay, so first of all, what is essential for inclusive growth? That is equality of opportunity. Equality of opportunity. This is essential for the inclusive growth, that all these people, everyone should have equality of opportunity, equal access to the resources as well as the jobs. If we can ensure this, this can also be defined as meritocracy. That the differences here should not reflect in the access to the resources, access to the jobs. That is very important here. So, if we can ensure equality of opportunity in the economy, then we can ensure that there is inclusive growth even in the market economy mechanism. Okay. So, for this, we need to ensure, first of all, that everyone has access to quality education. So it's not just about availability of jobs. You should also have education so that you can do that job. Just by saying that we are not discriminating everyone, job market is open to everyone, your job is not complete, your focus, your policy is not complete. If we have differences in education level as per rural urban divide, as per gender, as per some of the other divisions, then your equality to opportunity is not complete. Okay, so ensuring the access to the quality education and health, that is essential. And this is also essential today in the context of the human development and human capital. So from that perspective also it is necessary that government focuses on this aspect. Clear? And then there are some questions, for certain aspects. For example, ensuring meritocracy, ensuring that people cannot offer jobs as per favors, individual favors, or kinship, nepotism, etc. Okay, so these are the certain points. Basically, it is all about equality of opportunity. If you look at the detailed hints, they cover it in more points. But the crux of the matter is equality of opportunity. But equality of opportunity is not just complete by offering jobs to everyone. We should also offer them the ability to do the job. We should offer them equal access to quality education and health. Once both aspects are complete, then we can say private sector will also create inclusive growth. Fair? Now you can come to the second part of the question. State the significance of the financial inclusion in achieving economic growth. So in the economic growth process, financial inclusion can also play a big role. So first of all, you very briefly define what is financial inclusion, okay, and then you come to the contribution of financial inclusion in economic growth. So if a wide section of society is out of the reach of formal credit, is out of the reach of financial services, they will not be able to utilize their potential, because today the inclusive growth is not just about access to the job market, because all of us do not only do the job, some of us would also like to become entrepreneurs, would like to opt for self-employment, and for that we need some capital, and for that financial inclusion is necessary. So if a large section of society does not have access to the market, financial market, then they will not be able to raise funds at a proper cost or at a affordable cost, and they would not be able to reach out into the business or self-employment section, because that would require you to spend some capital, and capital is not available with everyone, and that is where your financial inclusion would play a very key role. Okay, even if you have business but otherwise not access to financial services, your business will also be disadvantaged. You will not be able to accept payments, accept cash. You would not be able to do several types of trade because of limitations regarding financial services. So availability of financial service is necessary if someone wants to opt for a entrepreneurial or a business career or a self-employment. In both the aspects, you are not dependent on the job market, you are dependent upon the credit market also. So in that sense, you come to the second aspect, and it would also inculcate the habit of saving among people. It would increase investment in the economy. Okay, basically as a whole we can say the financial inclusion strengthens the process of mobilization of resources. So this term you should mention. What it does, financial inclusion, it does lead to improvement or strengthening of mobilization of resources. So this is about the role of the market, financial market for people. So if financial market is limited to urban areas, only in urban areas resource mobilization would happen, not in rural areas. People, even if they have bright ideas in rural area, they would not be able to access the job market, take loan and do the investment. So this link between savings and investment, this is essential for the economic growth. Resource mobilization and hence investment is the key ingredient and the most important factor behind growth that you should establish. And with that, your answer should be complete. Towards the end, if you have space, because it is a 150 word question, so if you can manage to squeeze all of that within 120, 130 words, then towards the end you can write a short way forward, okay, that what we need to do in order to improve financial inclusion further. So government has already initiated several very successful schemes like Jan Dhan Yojana, Mudra, etc. But we need to increase financial inclusion as much as possible by focusing on other aspects or other schemes. There you can mention some of the current initiatives. So now if you can squeeze in this way forward, it would be really good. Now let us look at the next question. Okay, what are the major challenges of PDS in India? How it can be made effective and transparent? Again, a very straightforward question regarding the public distribution system. So, in the introduction part, here you can talk about that the distribution of food is a state subject and it is a responsibility of state government, but the state governments are aided by the central government through agencies like FCI. So, you explain this structure in the introduction. Structure of distribution. The structure of the distribution. This is very important. Clear? State list, center aids or helps through FCI, through issuing food grants and providing food at a very cheaper cost. Through food grants or FCI. Okay, you talk about it, then you come to the next part, that since it is a state subject, different states are at a different level of development. Center can support the state governments, but it is ultimately an area where state government themselves should bring reforms and improve the working. So because of that reason, we should understand that there is a lot of regional variation. Clear? There is a lot of regional variation. And some states are distributing the food grains much more effectively, much more efficiently. And they have digitized their distribution mechanism and system as well. And their overall process is very smooth. However, not all the states are at that category. Many of the states are much backward. Okay, so that would cover the first, let us say, 1/3 of your answer. Then you talk about some of the issues. Okay, these were the structural issues. This is because of the very design of the distribution. Then you talk about the particular issues. Among the issues you can talk about the, for example, quality of food grain. Okay, sometimes in PDS mechanism, the quality of food grain that is supplied is not good. Then you can talk about the lack of takeoff at certain time, that all the food that is distributed to those ration shops, that is not lifted off, that is not taken off by people. Because first of all, we target a very big population under PDS mechanism. At present, almost 2/3 of India's population is covered under the National Food Security. That is a very big population. So we are not only covering the absolute poor, we are also covering the relative poor under the PDS mechanism. And when you talk about it, you can also talk about, for this reason, the Shanta Kumar panel, which was a major committee on FCI, Shanta Kumar panel argued that we can perhaps reduce the number of beneficiary under the National Food Security Act. Instead of 2/3 of population, roughly 65% of population, we can target 40% of the poorest population in India. That would cover the absolute poor and also the needy among the relative poor. So that was the argument. So you can mention very briefly about that. The question is not Shanta Kumar panel or FCI, but they have a recommendation for PDS, so you can talk about it is relevant here. And then you can talk about some of the other technical issues. Okay, for example, connectivity issues, the server issues that is there. Okay, because of which people sometimes are unable to take the stocks. And now you can talk about the most important issue, however, with the PDS is the exclusion error. Exclusion. Some people are unable to get the benefits of PDS, even though they are among the intended beneficiaries. So, for example, during the digitization of ration card, deletion of some ration cards. Similarly, linking the ration cards to Aadhaar. In that process also, some people could not update their records. So some bona fide people, some genuinely needy people got excluded from the benefits. That is a major concern and must be addressed quickly. So that is your key concern. Okay, and how it can be made more effective and transparent in future. Okay, so first of all, we should include more and more e-governance in the process to make it more efficient and transparent. So for example, you can talk about that government has already integrated the PDS system. Under the present PDS system, you can, many of the states have integrated their system. So for example, if you are from Odisha, let us say, you can get your quota of food in some of the other states which have integrated their PDS approach. Earlier, you could get it only from a single shop to which your account is located or allocated. So as per your address, as per your local area coding, there would be a particular shop. But with the digitization of ration card, that requirement has been done away in most of the states today. However, some states are lagging even in that. Then role of Aadhaar here is very important. That linking ration cards with Aadhaar was a very important process which was undertaken, and that is further improving the transparency and the effectiveness in the system. It is also improving the targeting of the system. Okay. So effectively we are able to target the population group and reduce on the leakages as well. Okay, and then very briefly you can talk about the Vadhva committee, which has talked about some of the technology based reforms under the targeted PDS system. Okay, and then perhaps you can talk about, let us say, availability of digital records, that not only the ration shop owner should be able to access database, everyone should be able to access the database. So you can log in into the system. Just like you can log in and check your Aadhaar card, you should be able to log in into a system and check how much grains, food grains have been lifted in your name in this particular month. Okay, how much you can get. Carry forward system. Okay, so these kind of reforms will further improve the mechanism. And towards the end, you can talk about that we can have more reforms into the mechanism. For example, we can offer an option regarding DBT and actual product, that people who do not want to get the subsidized product but would rather get DBT, direct benefit transfer, in their account. Let us say we argue that the amount of food grains that are provided at subsidy by the government, their value is around 700 rupees per month. So instead of giving you 700 rupees per month, the food grains per month, government can give you 700 rupees cash per month or 300 rupees cash per month, depending upon what you are getting in which state. Some states are giving, for example, even lentils and coarse cereals. So their per capita expenditure is more on the PDS. Since it is a state subject, there is huge variation in the mechanism. So some people, if they want, they should be able to get it DBT. Okay. So that can be a future reform which will make it more people friendly, and it will also reduce the need for the grain storage and distribution. So that can be a major reform in the future. So that you can talk about in the way forward, that another major reform can be in this direction that will completely change the PDS mechanism. Fine. So not a very difficult question, but nonetheless, what you write is very important. Being relevant is the challenge here. Next question, much more easier than the previous ones. Elaborate the scope and significance of the food processing industry in India. Students, those who are here with us, those who are attending classes with us, they can immediately identify, they can get the exact question in their notes also, class notes straight away. Okay. So before we start food processing industry, we study its scope and significance. So first of all, the food processing industry is a sunrise sector. Being a sunrise sector, it has not yet achieved its full potential. It is nowhere even close to that. The potential of this sector is far more than its current size. And why we are arguing it in this manner? So, your introduction, you can talk about a sunrise sector. What is a sunrise sector? And why food processing it is a sunrise sector can be your next point. Why we are arguing that food processing industry is a sunrise sector? First of all, increasing urbanization. Or urban population. Urban people have more demand for processed foods. So for example, those of you who are living in joint families, so many things are prepared in your households. Okay, for example, achars, papad, so many things. Your family member, they are able to work on the work in the family itself. But those who live in nuclear families today, they do not get so many products processed within the family. So they are more dependent on the market to buy such products. Papad achar is one example. There are so many such things. For example, it's not just about joint family or nuclear family. It's also about the more changing nature of the women's role in the society. As more and more women today are working, they can provide less and less time to the food processing within the family. Okay, male, female, anyone in the joint family, since they shared different works, there was availability of time earlier. And with more and more people working, more and more women working, this is becoming more difficult. So point is urbanization, that with increasing urban population, the food processing requirement is going to increase significantly. This is one of the key points, that we are still a predominantly rural economy, and hence this sector will continue to increase till India is going to urbanize. Secondly, increasing per capita incomes. India is having a good economic growth, even though we would like higher than that, but still we are one of the best performing economy in the last decade, and at present we are the highest growing or the fastest growing large economy in the world. So increasing per capita income is also going to increase the demand for processed food. This is also a major point. Then another aspect is that India has so many agriculture products within the country. So raw material is available locally and very cheap. That is also a major boosting point for the food processing industry. Okay, so in that aspect also, it is a sunrise sector. Raw material. Then another aspect why we call it is a sunrise or a major emerging sector is because we have a lot of friendly countries in the neighborhood or extended neighborhood which import a lot of processed food or food products. Okay, so there are so many countries which have deficiency in the food production. For example, UAE, for example, Japan, South Korea. In those countries, there is shortage of food production in many areas. So they import a lot of food from outside and processed food also from outside. So there also our industry has a lot of scope to extend their exports in these territories. And since we also have very friendly relationship with them and our logistics chain is also well established with these countries, so it would not be too big a challenge. So in those areas, we will have a huge potential in future also. So these are some of the major reasons why it is a sunrise sector. And then we can talk about its significance for the Indian economy. So far what we have discussed is the scope. Now you can talk about the significance. What is the significance of the food processing industry? So the significance of the food processing industry is that food processing industry growth will also automatically develop the backward, just a second please, the backward and forward linkages. Backward linkages link the industry to the agriculture. So for example, you are a company which processes apple jam, and in order to process and produce apple jam, you need to procure apples very regularly. And in order to manage your inventory, your stocks level, you have to get into contract farming for apples, or you have to get into agreements for apples, that you have agreement with various farmers that this crop is mine, I will pay you this much amount, when the crop is ready I will come and pick it up. That is how most of the apple is sold today. So either traders or the food processing industry. So food processing industry can also lead to development of agriculture. This is very important. As the industry will grow, its impact on the backward linkages will also increase. And in that mechanism, there will be big impact on the agriculture itself. It can modernize agriculture. It can develop contract farming, improve farmers' income. It can contribute in this aspect. Next is reduce the wastage. A lot of food in India is at present wasted. Processing can definitely reduce the wastage to a very large extent. This is also very important. Third, investment in infrastructure. Agriculture infrastructure is not very well developed. That requires a lot of investment. And food processing industry, being a major buyer, can investment in agri-infra. Investment in agriculture infrastructure. Clear? So, for example, in fact, you can expand this point and also include the logistics. Okay, storage, all such infrastructure we can work upon. Okay, and then the nature of food processing industry is such that it can employ a large number of people. Its labor intensity is fairly high. That also should come here. Okay, employment. It is a fairly labor intensive sector. And another major aspect is that it also employs women in large number. So it can create not only employment, it can create employment for women. It can create employment for semi-educated, uneducated, illiterate people also. And it can create those jobs in rural economy and semi-rural or urban areas. So those would be some of the major significance of this industry. And towards the end, you can talk about that despite such a huge potential and major, let us say, expectation from the sector, its growth in last decade has been relatively disappointing. The major government schemes such as mega food parks, etc., have performed below potential. And by 2018, for example, only 13 out of 37 proposed mega food parks were open. Okay, today this number has increased, I think, to 21 or 22. Okay, but most of those which have opened in between, they are not operational in proper sense. I mean, the park is open for investment, but not many companies are there. Only 13 of them are functioning, where at least there are several firms developing the products. Okay. So, however, in the last few years, we have seen revival. So, lack of investments were there. Now, government in recent years has taken a lot of steps for further growth of this sector. You cannot explain the government schemes or initiatives, just mention it and finish it. That in the last decade, its performance was not so good, but of late, within last decade, let us say around 2010 to 2015-16 or 17 period was not so good, but it has picked up from 2017-18 onwards. And the reason for this pickup is actually investments by the companies which are in the retail of food or food retail companies. So they have actually invested in the sector. So that is the reason, but again, no scope to go in detail, just give a passing reference in the way forward. So that would be all for this. And quite a scoring question, okay. Last question from the section A. The increase in life expectancy in the country has led to newer health challenges in the community. What are those challenges and what steps need to be taken to meet them? So the average lifespan of people, the life expectancy at birth has improved. What are the associated challenges for the government or for the bureaucracy? In the introduction, you should give some basic statistics. What are these basic statistics? That, for example, the life expectancy in India has improved to above 70 now. Okay, so 20 years ago it was close to 63 or 62, and we have seen a significant increase in the 21st century also. So the average life expectancy has exceeded 70 today. This is the increase in the lifespan. So a person is now expected to live 10 years more in today's generation compared to the previous generation. Fine. Although in the last 3 years or 2 years, we have seen a drop in life expectancy also, by the way. After COVID, the number has reduced. Okay, it was touching 72 almost. It has reduced by almost 1.5%, 1.5 year here. So this has been the decline as well. But nonetheless, overall in the last 20 years, we have seen an increase in decade in a person's life. So this is a major development here. Now, at the time of independence, this was merely 32 years, okay, because a lot of children would not survive and they would reduce the average significantly down. Not that people were dying at very young age, but not many children would survive. So our life expectancy was very low. So this kind of statistic you can provide in the beginning. Then you can come to the next aspect, that we have seen in countries like Japan, countries like Germany, that massive increase in life expectancy, because these countries achieved a very high life expectancy in the 1980s itself. So in countries like Germany and Japan, that massive increase in life expectancy has a big impact on the economy. The increase in the dependency ratio is a major effect. Increase in dependency. In India, this has not been a major problem so far because our birth rate was very high. But from now onwards, the dependency ratio will increase. Now we are roughly arriving at a replacement rate. So, increase in dependency ratio. Okay, and this leads to a slowdown in the growth rate of the economy. When this happens, this significantly changes a lot of things. For example, China has seen a massive increase in dependency ratio, partly because of one child policy. Because of one child policy, their population has actually started to decrease. In the last 2 generations, number of people born are much less compared to the earlier generations, and those generations are now getting old. or reaching the old age in the next 1 or 2 decades. So China would be facing this problem more or little more earlier than India. Japan, Germany has already faced the problem. So this would give you a very nice explanation and background to the problem, that while India is going to face it, there are many countries which have already seen it. And what was the impact on those countries? Increase in dependency ratio, increase in medical expenses, increase or decrease in the growth rate. So these points you can talk about. And this is what will happen in India as well in future. So what would be the challenge? If you look at our hints, the points, the number of points are little more than what you can write in examination. Okay, whereas what I'm covering here is relatively more regarding how much you can write in examination. So not all the points I'm reading out as they are in the hints. In fact, what I'm discussing here is more restricted to how much we can write in examination. Even I might exceed word limit a bit, but that much content still can be fit into the answer. So our hints should not overwhelm you that so many points are there, I'm missing out on them. Do not worry about it. Write three points each in the major segments, that is more than enough. Okay. So what would be the challenge? The first challenge is increase in healthcare expenditure. That would be major challenge. Second, increasing the healthcare professionals and infrastructure in next decade. Increasing the healthcare professionals and infrastructure in the next 2 decades. That would be another major challenge, that we need to boost up the infrastructure. This is presently very weak at present. Okay. So this would be a major challenge. Okay. And another challenge would be to third, increase in pension spending of government. Raising resources for this. Okay. Pension will be a very big challenge at that time. Giving these people financial support, okay, pension spending, financial support to those people. That would be a very big challenge. Okay, now what steps can we take in order to overcome such challenges? So first of all, developing the healthy habit and lifestyle. That is all very important here. Developing healthy lifestyle. Okay, so for example, a major development, positive development in India in last 2-3 decades has been decrease in the number of smokers. The number of people who smoke has drastically come down. However, unfortunately, at the same time, number of people who drink alcohol, their number has significantly increased. So when one health hazard has gone down, another health hazard has increased. Okay, another major challenge would be to shift people from eating carbohydrates to the other sources of food. Unfortunately, in India, diet is dominated by carbohydrates. That is how our food security evolved in the last 50 years. Our food security was around wheat and rice. And as a result, wheat and rice is a staple for most of the people. And both of them are major carbohydrate providers. So we need to diversify the food basket of people, and for that we need to create a lot of awareness. So developing healthy lifestyle, okay, which would also include the diet, okay, exercise, diet, certain habits, all of them are very important for the people who are in their 40s today, people who are in their late 30s today, for example, people like me, okay, people who are overweight, again you can look at me here, so they have to be more careful, they have to adopt healthy lifestyle because they would be at the risk of disease is much more than the other people. So this is very important. Okay. Another important aspect would be developing healthy financial habits. Developing healthy financial habits. So inculcating the habit of savings among people, providing many more pension funds in the market, attractive pension funds in the market where people can save for their old age, encouraging this, that you cannot anymore depend on the family members. For example, in our society in past, your next generations, your children, your grandchildren would take care of you in old age, but that is rapidly changing now. Okay, for higher education, your children would be studying in other states, in other countries, and for their jobs also they would be living far away from you. So even if you have a lot of family members, it is not necessary that they would be living with you. Even if they are financially well to do, still they would not be available. Okay, so the dependency on the next generations, that we should remove from people mindset that that same mechanism would live for the coming years also. Already a significant erosion in the family support has happened, okay, and much more can happen in future. So that is also very important. So for that reason also we need to develop healthy financial habit of savings, habit of investing today for our old age, so that we are not dependent on the government, or we do not suddenly become very poor at that age. Okay, so these are what we need to develop among people. And for government definitely has to increase the budgets and has to open more colleges, educational institution, to create more healthcare staff, because we need to increase this massively increase. Okay, so for example, we need to double up the number of nurses in the country to maintain a minimum ratio of 3 nurse per 100 people. Otherwise our healthcare system will be inadequate. During the second wave of COVID, we saw the entire system broke down, although COVID is a once in a lifetime kind of a thing. So nobody could have prepared that kind of infrastructure for the COVID, but just like we saw infrastructure breaking down in future because of the simply the number of people, the infrastructure would be overwhelmed. So when we become old, I mean people of my age, they become old in another 25-30 years, we will find it difficult to get hospitals if government do not invest today significantly. So these are some of the important aspects, and then you can talk about some of the routine regular points, okay, that government needs to, let us say you talk about certain schemes that government is doing this and that, and through that government can address those issues. So regulation point, general points they can cover towards the end, but that would be the major approach for the question. I hope that is clear. Now let us look at the 15-mark question. Next question is economic growth in the recent past has been led by increase in labor productivity. Explain this statement. Suggest the growth pattern that will lead to creation of more jobs without compromising labor productivity. So again, not a very difficult question, quite a straightforward question, although on the face of it, it looks more challenging. So you need to understand first of all the approach, the basis of the question. The basis of the question is jobless growth. Between the year 2000 and 2010 or roughly 2008, India achieved a very high growth rate of 8 to 9%. When economy is growing at such a rapid pace, we should also be increasing the employment opportunities for people at a rapid pace. But unfortunately, that did not happen. Basically, we were creating just enough jobs for the new entrants. We were not able to increase the number of jobs beyond that. Okay, so we could not create more opportunities as much as the increasing pressure of population. So roughly what we had during this period, despite a record economic growth, was jobless growth. This phenomena is well studied, well documented and discussed a lot. So we know about jobless growth. But the requirement was to link this question with the jobless growth. Basically, it is argued that economic growth in the recent past is because of the labor productivity. Hence, the growth has not created more jobs, it has simply made people more productive. So it's the same number of people, same number of workers are creating more output. That is why there is more economic growth. That is the sense of the question. Once you get that sense, the question is quite straightforward. Okay, so how we can create more jobs without compromising labor productivity? So not very difficult again, as I'm saying. So you need to talk about the jobless growth. You need to explain this whole phenomena. You need to talk about the 8 to 9% of growth and how it did not lead to much of job creation. And this all, during this phase, our growth was services-led growth. The bulk of the growth was coming from services sector, which was growing at 11 to 13% certain point of time, whereas industry was struggling around 5%, 4%. Okay, agriculture 3%. So that also you can talk about in the next aspect. And then you can talk about that because of this problem, we have seen a change in the approach of the government. Because we had jobless growth, because we could not create adequate number of jobs, the government has understood that services-led growth will not be enough to address the job challenge or employment challenge in India. And for this reason, the industry has become one of the focus area of government. Okay, if you look at the last 10 years or 8 years of the current government, then manufacturing or industry is the focus area. They do not talk that much about services or focus that much on services. In contrast, if you look at the 10 years of Manmohan Singh, the policies and the support for industry was much less compared to what it is today, because we have understood the need for the economy. It's not that there is a difference in the personality of people and that is why there is a change. If Manmohan Singh would have been PM today, or if the different team would have been leading, even they would have opted for industry. Okay, so because industry is our need, that is quite visible, because it is industry which can create jobs in big numbers. So now in the last decade or last 7 to 8 years, we can see that government has launched several flagship programs for job creation or industrial growth, which we believe will automatically create more jobs. So what are those flagship programs? For example, Make in India has been a major flagship program of the government. And now we can even argue that Make in India is giving us good results, because if you look at the FDI in India, until few years ago, the bulk of FDI was coming for services sector, but today industry also has a significant share in it. Still, services get more FDI compared to industry, but the share of industry is constantly rising in the last 5 years, and that is a major development for us. Okay, and that changes the very nature of the economic growth also. So Make in India, we can also argue, is a success from that basis. So apart from that, Skill India mission. Okay. Another thing that government is focusing on is that do not only be a job seeker, be an entrepreneur, create jobs. Okay. So startup is a way forward to job creation. Hence, there has been a major focus on startups. And this is also showing results. People were making fun of it few years ago, but now we can see results in last few years. Just in last 2 years, we have seen 100 startups emerging from India, which are in the unicorn category. Means each of them have a market capitalization more than $1 billion. $100 billion worth of startups just from 100 companies. I mean, much more, value is much more. Minimum 100 billion in these. And 70,000 startups have started in last 2 years. Okay. So even Startup India also has been a major success, we can argue. So basically, expanding very fast, creating job opportunities is the solution to the job issue. But earlier in the services sector, the issue was we were not able to create adequate jobs. But if the same growth come from manufacturing, then it would create a difference. It would open up job opportunities even for a very different kind of population. The services sector, while are urban based, focuses on urban population and highly skilled people, particularly English speaking people, they get job in services sector, except a few areas in services sector such as tourism, transport, etc. Most of the other areas, for example, banking, financial services, IT, over there we have highly educated people. So compared to that, the relatively rural people, lesser educated people, where they will go? If more opportunities are in manufacturing, they also get job. So manufacturing is the solution. Okay, so growth pattern, a growth dominated by manufacturing. So we are creating various opportunities here. Certain industries which we can identify can employ millions of people. We are starting to focus on one industry by one. So for example, toy industry, we have seen. Toy is a MSME industry over where the labor intensity is very, very high. Actually, toy industry is one of the highly labor intensive industry. And what we have seen in recent years, in last 3 years, we have seen complete transformation of toy industry. Okay, toy industry is although a small industry at present, around, let us say, it is a little less than $2 billion in India. Okay. Earlier, almost $600 million, this industry has become little less than $2 billion. Earlier, when this industry was 1 billion. Even in this industry, roughly 600 million worth of toys were imported. Almost 60% of the toy that was sold in India a few years ago, 5 years ago, they were made in China or foreign made in America. So from that, we have reached a stage where almost 85% of what is sold in India is made in India. And not only that, our exports have nearly doubled in the last 2 years. So through such initiatives, through focusing on sector by sector, we can work out this issue and we can significantly enhance the job creation. For example, PLI scheme. Okay, so creating such a growth pattern would allow us to focus on the job creation. Okay, similarly, for example, we can talk about the special package for the ready-made garments. So government is focusing on this very importantly. In last few years, economic survey itself has focused that we have to identify which sectors have more output to labor elasticity. So sectors which have higher output to labor elasticity, they should be promoted. So for example, ready-made garments have very high output to labor elasticity. So for example, if your output doubles, your demand for labor also should double. Then it is a very good elasticity. Now ready-made garments have in elasticity which is close to 1, almost 0.8990. Okay, so that is a data from economic survey. You do not have to write those elasticities in examination, so do not get worried and intimidated by this number, but just to giving you some idea, you can simplify it, that we are focusing on certain industries where the labor elasticity is high with respect to output. So ready-made garments, for example, were given a special package under the Foreign Trade Policy 2015-20, and that package is still continuing. Similarly, leather industry was given a similar package. Okay, so we are identifying which sectors create more employment, and those are given preferential treatment. For example, in the case of these two industries, they get higher export subsidies in the form of duty credit scripts. So initiatives like this, or some of the others as we have discussed, you can talk about, for example, toy industry, and then you can argue that such schemes and such initiatives would help us to adopt a growth pattern where the job creation or employment creation would be one of the biggest economic objective apart from the growth. And that is where you can, and I hope this answer has helped you. Now let us look at the next question. Very easy. In fact, we would have a very short discussion on it because quite a straightforward and easy answer. Okay, so you can refer to the hints for large part of this. Do you think India will meet 50% of its energy need from renewable energy by 2030? We are going to achieve it before 2030, by the way. Okay, so that's no longer a challenge actually. That is why this is very easy. Justify your answer. Okay, and how will the shift of subsidy from fossil to renewables will achieve the above objective? Fine. So very easy actually. We have already achieved a target where roughly 39% of our total power production can be achieved from renewable sources. Some of our biggest renewable sources are hydropower. Okay, this was traditional area where we were investing. The size of hydropower itself is quite significant. Then solar power, which has now become the number one renewable energy provider. Solar power, and third is wind energy. Consider these three as the major provider of renewable energy. Today, together, they are offering roughly 39% of our overall energy requirement. Okay. So 50% will not be a very tough challenge to achieve. The way the solar capacity is increasing year by year, it is not going to be very difficult. Okay? So we have a track record which tells us that we should be able to achieve this target significantly. We should be able to exceed this 50% actually. So you do not have to be very modest here. This is the achievement of us, our government, us as people, and we should talk about it very easily. That this number would be surpassed much before 2030. The way present development is happening. Last year alone, we have added almost 18 gigawatts of solar capacity, additional solar capacity. Prior to that, we added almost 14 gigawatt in the previous 2 years. This year, we expect around 20 to 22 gigawatts. If we are increasing at this pace, in 5 years, we develop 100 gigawatt capacity. Okay, what is our total energy requirement in India? Our total energy requirement in India is around 600 gigawatts. Okay, this is by 2025, and by 2030, the best case scenario is around 750 gigawatts would be our requirement by 2030. This is the likely scenario. We have to achieve 50% of it. That means roughly 375 gigawatt of power. Even if we add solar capacity, roughly around 25 gigawatt in the coming time, in the next decade, then just solar alone would add up another 200 gigawatt out of it. At present, we already have we have achieved a capacity somewhere between 140 40 to 160 gigawatts. Okay, so on top of that we have another 200 from solar, or 150-60 from solar in the worst case scenario. Even then 300 gigawatts just from that. Okay, and then we will definitely have some expansion in wind and hydel. So not a challenge. Okay, so calculation is not very difficult. You can refer to the hints for the remaining part of the question here. Now I'm rather going to focus on the second part a bit more. How will the shift of subsidy from solar fuel to renewables helps achieving the objective? So in the last decade, India has discontinued the fossil fuel subsidies in many areas. For example, oil. For example, even in coal, we have started reducing the support to the coal-based manufacturers. For example, ultra mega power projects, UMPP, were a big priority of government in 2005 to 2015. Our focus was UMPP, ultra mega power plants. But in the last 7-8 years, we have not seen much focus on coal-based power plant. Of course, the present ones are working and there are plans to open more of them, but the future capacity addition we are expecting largely from renewables. So the focus which was on UMPP, and they were getting a big government support as well, that has reduced in recent years. And there has been more and more subsidy support to solar. For example, we are encouraging where almost 400 million people in India can have a rooftop based solar power. Okay, so I am also proud owner of one such solar rooftop based solar plant. And to tell you, except air conditioner, everything in house is backed by solar power in my household, and it's not very costly. So a lot of people are able to afford the solar panels. So a commercial solar panel, if you want to purchase from market, then it would cost you somewhere around 12 to 13,000 rupees an individual solar panel. Let us say you need 4 solar panels to power the basic electronics in the family. So individual cost would be around 50, or let us say 60,000. Okay. Whereas government is providing the same under subsidy programs for almost 25 to 35,000 depending upon the government. So the government is providing good finance on this. So we are encouraging more and more people to adopt solar based power panels, and that would also reduce the requirement. So this 750 gigawatt, even that much may not be required by the state supply. A lot of people should be able to produce their power themselves and be dependent less and less on government. So that also we need to understand. Okay, so there has been a massive shift from UMPP etc. to solar, so that more and more people use solar based power. And a lot of people are also producing and selling to the government grids. So government has also encouraged farmer. There are schemes under which farmers can produce solar power in their farms and sell it to government, and there are many people who are earning very well out of those schemes. So that also you can mention, and then towards the end you can talk about this. Okay? So the shift of subsidy should also be very clear to you. So I hope this is clear. Okay, not a very difficult question. It looks difficult when you read it first actually. First you need to simplify the question in your mind before you start answering it. Both the question read more tough than they actually were. What are the major bottlenecks, main bottlenecks in upstream and downstream process of marketing of agriculture products? See, you should be able to simplify a lot of things. Your understanding should be from the very basic. Once it is from the very basic, no question is challenging. This question looks very challenging. अरे मैंने पढ़ा नहीं, what is the bottleneck in the main upstream downstream process? ऐसा लगेगा एग्जाम में बैठ के. Okay, you might feel like that, but that is not true. Simply understand what is the role of market. If you understand the role of market, backward forward linkages are not at all an issue. The first role of market is to conduct transaction. okay, enable buyer and seller to meet, okay, so that they can transact. For example, Amazon, eBay, Flipkart, any of us can register as seller on those platforms, and since it is very easy to search and identify a product, pick up a product, the mechanism helps us to get buyer. So that is also a marketplace. Okay, the e-commerce in India is based upon the marketplace model. The government of India does not allow proprietary based multi-retail. So it is marketplace mechanism where it is enabling the buyer and sellers to meet with each other. So conducting transaction is the first function. Second, offering services and support to suppliers. So for example, on eBay, you do not have to write about eBay, Amazon, but I'm just using this as a background explanation. So for example, if you're a seller on e-commerce, you get a lot of support. Individually, it is impossible for you to set your own supply chain, but Amazon supply chain you can use at a very nominal cost. You can pay them some commission and use their supply chain. Okay, and that is very efficient and effective. So that is a major service you get. Okay, so you also get a lot of tech support. You also get a lot of backup and grievance readdressal. So in that mechanism, we need to understand market must support the providers or sellers. Third, offer different product at each price point to meet demand of buyer. Not all buyers are same. Someone might require a very high-end, very expensive product. Someone might require a very low-end, very cheap product. So everybody's requirement is different, and there should be products on each price point. Then you are serving all the buyers. Now, the food processing industry, okay, all of this you do not have to write. I'm just giving you the background explanation how, if you understand the things in a very simple way. I've just explained what market does. And now, once you are writing answer, you can understand how this understanding helps you significantly in examination. So, for the food processing industry, or sorry, I'm saying food processing, the marketing of agriculture, the agriculture markets, they enable the meeting between farmer. The farmers are the sellers. And who are the buyers? There are traders who purchase from APMC. There is food processing industry. Okay, so for example, there is a rice mill. The representative from rice mill will buy from the market APMC. The trader, food processing, and other industries, other people. For example, even government such as FCI purchases from the APMC. So farmer is the seller and they are the buyer. At present, our APMC is only doing the role of ensuring that there is a marketplace where farmer can sell to the traders or food processing or the government or others. But this is not the only role of market. At present, our APMC and other agriculture markets, they do not offer much services to the suppliers. So farmers, they do not get much services from the APMC mechanism. In fact, even their payments are quite late and there are many more issues in the mechanism. So they do not have capacity in many aspects. So hence their their supply chain, okay, in which farmer is a backward linkage, that is very weak. They do not support farmers adequately. Our APMC's mechanism, which is varies from state to state again, has a lot of difference in each state. Some state, for example, allow for corporate farming. Some states allow for contract farming. So let us say you talk about potatoes in India. So Frito-Lay's, which is a unit of Pepsi, and Okay, so it produces potato wafers or chips. So it wanted to procure potatoes in India, but unfortunately, the farmers in Uttar Pradesh could not benefit because the marketing mechanism in Uttar Pradesh did not allow for the contracts. Despite the fact that Uttar Pradesh was the biggest and the best potato growing region in India, Frito-Lays had to go to Punjab and Gujarat for the procurement of potatoes because those markets allowed for the contracts. So that is how your market can facilitate you, give you more option, give you more development. Okay, so this contributes significantly to your long-term growth. So our agriculture market, instead of offering services, rather restrict the different options for the farmers. In that sense, the backward linkages are not well developed. Okay. And similarly, if we talk about the downstream process or the forward linkages, the downstream process or the forward linkages then go to the food processing industry or different type of traders. Unfortunately, there also the mechanism is such, the product is just simply brought and auctioned off. There is a lack of grading, classification, standardization or certification of the product. In absence of it, the buyer cannot straight away purchase from such markets. For example, if you want to buy wheat, it is very difficult for you to purchase it from APMC through auction mechanism. And because there is a lack of grading, etc., the market mechanism is very poor in that aspect. And people do not have much options to purchase. And this is one of the reasons why agriculture products are not well priced and farmers are not able to earn premium because we are not creating adequate brands. So only certain farmers who are growing basmati rice, they have better income because basmati rice, we have all these functions. The auction in basmati rice is specifically as per the grading, classification, etc. because there are large number of basmati rice export companies in India which do this job. But other than that, other agricultural products suffer in that aspect. So our agriculture marketing does not provide you much services. For example, at present, if you are from outside the state, you cannot directly participate in the auction process. Let us say there is a pharmaceutical company in Karnataka and it has to purchase guar gum from, let us say, Haryana or Rajasthan. Guar is a crop whose product is used for making capsule shells, let us say. So they cannot directly participate. They have to buy it through a trader from those markets. And those traders can charge you hefty margins for that. So there are many such restrictions even for the buyers. And contract farming restriction, which affects farmers, also affects the food processing industry very badly. So our markets have not been able to develop market infrastructure either. Okay. APMCs have not focused on developing agriculture marketing infrastructure, which would install machines for auto cleaning, which would install machines for automatic sorting or grading, so that a farmer's crop can be reclassified and sorted into 4 different products as per quality and farmer can get a better price. Those kind of services are not offered. So you can structure your answer around that, okay? And that would give you a very good insight into the question. Your approach should be very simple. Simply understand what is the role of market. Then any market you have to write about, you can very easily understand. So here, what is your upstream? What is your downstream? That should be clear. Upstream, basically the supplier to you. That is, here is farmer, and downstream is the one whom you are selling. That is your buyer. Last question, what is integrated farming system? Last question from the Indian economy section. How is it helpful to small and marginal farmers in India? So, the integrated farming approach is largely based upon the concerns raised by Swaminathan Foundation. So, Swaminathan Foundation more than a decade ago published reports on evergreen farming and started talking about this issue that the green revolution was good for India and it has contributed a lot, but today we need to focus away from green revolution because it has several side effects and we need to focus more on the evergreen farming so that our farms can remain evergreen, they have more sustainability. So it is a combined approach that is aiming at efficient, cost effective, and sustainable farming. Okay, so you, in the introduction part, you talk about the what is integrated farming system, link it to the evergreen farming, highlight the issues in green revolution. That would be your extended introduction. Okay, about almost 50 to 60 words you should spend there. So, for example, regarding the ill effects of green revolution, the green revolution was based upon certain chemicals, particularly urea and DDT. Nowadays, these have changed the nature of pesticide and fertilizer also. Instead of urea, we are using, for example, more of diammonium phosphate, okay, DAP, for example. Similarly, instead of DDT, we have more modern insecticides or pesticides, for example, marker, etc. So there are some insecticides like that. So the point is, coming back to the central issue, Green Revolution promoted the use of urea and DDT, and Green Revolutions focused on select few crops such as wheat and rice, particularly rice. And it did develop food security for India, but in the meanwhile, it affected the long-term productivity in agriculture. Overuse of urea, overuse of DDT has affected the productivity of Punjab very badly. Punjab, which was the major beneficiary of Green Revolution, today has one of the highest affected soil in the soil health card surveys, as we have noticed. So this had a very bad impact on the soil. Similarly, the another aspect on which Green Revolution was based upon was irrigation, but over irrigation has further affected the soil by salinization. So that was also another impact of Green Revolution. So the point is, Green Revolution had several bad effects. Now, how we can have efficient, cost-effective and sustainable farming? So first of all, it can be cost-effective if you choose correct crop as per the ecosystem. Okay, because different crops pay you differently. Farmer choose crop not as per their local ecology, but farmer choose crop as per the crop which pays highest per acre. As a result, Rajasthan, which is not suitable for wheat, as wheat is a temperate region crop. We have seen almost 17 to 18 districts in Rajasthan today producing wheat, whereas earlier it was largely restricted to 5-6 districts from, let us say, Ganganagar to Churu, etc. So some districts which were bordering Rajasthan, Punjab, only they were producing wheat, handful of them. But today wheat is produced right into the deep interiors of Rajasthan. So because it is not very suitable ecologically, although it gives you better income, farmers are forced to use more urea and the chemicals in the crop. If your crop is suitable and if you can get a good price for your crop, then more cost effective would always be the more ecologically suitable crop. So choice of crop is very important, and for that we need to address the pricing mechanism. So that was also a major aspect. Okay. Then effective, okay, cost effective and efficient. Okay. Now the effectiveness in terms of output and total income. So in that sense, it also focuses on integrated or intensive, mix intensive farming. Okay, so for example, not only the food crops, but several of the agricultural practice simultaneously. So that is very important, that you do not only go for traditional agriculture, but also have some of the other aspects, for example, livestock. So once you have livestock, then the wastage from your farm can be used to feed your cattle, and the waste from your cattle can be used as manure in farms. Okay, so in that set, it will support each other and it will reduce your overall cost. It will create a self-sustaining and self-supporting ecosystem in the farms. So that is also important. Because of tractors and because of the modernization of agriculture, we have stopped focusing on these aspects. Earlier, our agriculture was better in at least in those sense. But now, if not for, let us, plowing, you need cattle for milk. So dairy cattles, poultry animals, I mean the birds, they, even their waste and their feeding can also be based upon the agriculture ecosystem. So on those mechanisms also it can support you. Then focus on organic farming, but not complete shift to organic farming. Okay, so reducing use of your chemical fertilizers slowly and adopting more natural fertilizers. For example, compost. Okay, so compost is much better than cow dung. So, and it's not very difficult to make, and it can also create local economy where a lot of people can earn by making compost. For example, vermicompost is the most popular one. So the same cow dung can be converted into vermicompost, okay, through the earthworms. Even that itself is an economic model to create a lot of employment. So integrated farming involves all these mechanisms simultaneously and focuses on the integrated approach so that we can reduce the cost, we can increase the output, and we can slowly shift to the organic farming wherever possible. Okay, so how we can increase the organic farming or the integrated approach? So for that we need to particularly focus on the subsistence farmers. Okay, so small and marginal farmers basically, because they are the ones who are in maximum need to improve. So for them, if we look at the last 4-5 years, 10 years, then government has launched several schemes. For example, National Livestock Policy, Rashtriya Pashudhan Yojana, for example, okay, Rashtriya Govardhan Yojana, so many different schemes for livestock, so many different schemes for other aspects regarding the cattle, poultry. Government is giving easy loans even to the subsistence farmers without much of securities, so that they can get some farm animals and they can improve their integration to the farming. Similarly, it's not just about animals, it is also about agroforestry integration into the traditional crops. For that also, government launched the agroforestry mission, bamboo mission, etc. in 2017. Under that also, particularly in northeast of India and some of the other areas like Chhattisgarh, etc., government has given lot of easy loans so that farmers can integrate agroforestry into their traditional farming. Okay, and overall we are developing the farm capacity, okay, by giving them different finance. So basically it is all about finance, and government is creating more and more schemes for each sector each year in order to integrate and deepen up the finance. And financing facilities are focused particularly on those aspects which improve the integration. So if you look at, study the agriculture as a whole, the government approach actually has been to improve the integration in a big way. So this is all regarding this question and also regarding the Indian economy. I hope this discussion has helped you. Now there are some questions remaining from disaster management, and for that Mr. Saurav would be taking the session ahead. Thank you.
Hello students, my name is Saurav Mishra. I am going to take two questions which came from disaster management. So basically when we talk about disaster management, our focus area definitely is on the management of the disaster, that if any event has occurred, any hazard has occurred, then how we are able to manage that first. Second, how we are dealing with the mitigation part of it. What is the strategies we need to follow to, preempt ourselves, prepare ourselves before the disaster occurs. So generally there are, if you follow the trend of UPSC GS paper 3, you will see that more or less 2 questions are from the disaster management section. Now, if you see these 2 questions, explain the mechanism and occurrence of cloudburst in the context of Indian subcontinent, and discuss 2 recent examples. This is focusing on the cloudburst, right? A hazard. Now, second question, we have explain the causes and effect of coastal erosion, and what are the available coastal management techniques for combating the hazard. So now, if you observe these 2 questions, we are more focusing here on the hazard itself, right? There are 2 aspects in disaster management. First, you know about the different hazards, and second, to deal with that hazard, what are the management tools we have, or laws we have, or schemes we have, right? So these 2 approaches we need to see. First, whether we are focusing on knowing the mechanism of that hazard, and second, about the management of that disaster, right? So this year both the question are from the core idea of the hazard itself, right? Question specifically is not asking about the disaster management part of it, but still beforehand we need to know all the different disasters which we have in our syllabus, just to get an idea that how by knowing the disaster we can understand and frame our policies properly, right? Now, if we directly go into the discussion of these questions, let us take the first question. Now the question is, explain the mechanism and occurrence of cloudburst. Now, why this question has been asked? Because in recent past we have been hearing about the events of cloudburst, right? So and this concept is also related to the flash flood, urban flood, which we are seeing, or specifically in the hilly regions, where because of the flash cloudburst we are seeing secondary disasters like landslides, etc., right? So because of that, this becomes a contemporary issue in the last few years, and eventually UPSC has asked question on cloudburst. Now, how to address this question? What are the keywords here? First of all, it is talking about the explain the mechanism of cloudburst and the occurrence. Now, in first part you will have to talk about the mechanism part, the process of the cloudburst, and the occurrence, which all areas are more vulnerable to this disaster. And in the same context, you need to provide 2 recent examples, right? So pretty straightforward question. So how to approach? What would be your introduction here? Now, in introduction itself, you can define what cloudburst is, right? It is basically, if you see, the core idea here is we are talking about rain, right? But that rain is very intense and in a short span of time. Even the geographical area covered is also limited. So when you put few conditions on rain itself, that event may become a cloudburst. What all conditions? That first of all, area has to be limited. So we are talking about limited area. Second, the intensity of rain, and third, short time period, right? So these 3 conditions, when you put on rain, we categorize them as cloudburst. So specifically talking about 10 centimeter per hour. So we are talking that micro, that we are talking about per hour basis, right? So that event is called cloudburst. What happens? suddenly in a smaller area a lot of water falls in terms of rainfall, and because of its high intensity it causes secondary disasters as well. So in introduction itself you need to define what you understand by cloud burst. Then come to the body part. In body, where you are directly addressing the question, first aspect is the mechanism. Now in mechanism you can talk about two different areas. One, when in the monsoon period, when talking specifically about the hilly regions, because the event of cloudburst you will see mostly in the hilly regions, right? Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh. So the news is being recurrent from those areas. So what happens there? One, there is a saturated cloud, and because of the hilly slope the hot air transcends up, and because of that hot air is reaching to the saturated cloud, it changes the temperature of it. So the saturation, it reaches over saturated point because of the uplift of hot air in the hilly regions, and because of that suddenly oversaturated cloud comes down, pours all the water and in a shorter period of time. So with that you can draw a diagram, a hilly region, show the uplift of hot air and how the clouds which are already saturated, because of the upliftment of the hot air, it gets oversaturated and it falls or pours all the water in a shorter period of span and time, right? So basically because of this event, in this hill slope there is chances of landslides also, and those landslide topsoil erosion, because of the sudden flow of water it will drag down the topsoil, which is most fertile for any agricultural activity. If it is going on, if the topsoil is removed, the soil becomes infertile, right? So the process, the mechanism of cloudburst will lead to other occurrences of different disaster. So you will have to link those aspects as well. Then after explaining the mechanism part, you should come to the occurrence. So when you discuss the occurrence, majorly you can divide it in two parts. One is the hilly regions, which we already talked about. Another is the you can say in city areas where you see the event of cloudburst leads to flash floods, right? So in the occurrence, when you are talking about the hilly areas, connect it with the landslide, and when you're talking in the city area, connect it with the flash floods, right? Now if the city management, the drainage system is not proper, then what will happen? In a shorter period of, say suppose 1 hour of cloudburst may lead to sudden flooding in the entire city if the city do not have a proper drainage system. So you can connect that to flash flood as well, right? So these are the mechanism and occurrences. After that, in your body part, you can talk about the consequence of different cloudburst which already has been happening in the recent past, how it impacts the property and people residing in those areas. So from that perspective, since it is a sudden flood happening because of the cloudburst, it may have an impact on the people residing in those areas as well. So talk about consequence, though it is not asked in the question, but in your body you should mention about the consequences in 2-3 points, right? Now in consequences, one aspect was the people and the property damage to that. Second aspect is the sheet erosion. Sheet erosion. That means because of this event of cloudburst, there can be several impacts. One of the major impact is the sheet erosion, where the top level soil is removed, the erosion of top layer soil happens, and because of that the fertility of that area, the soil fertility reduces. So it has a longer consequences because the top layer takes longer period of time to create a smaller granules of soil there, where you have presence of microbes and the soil has become fertile over a period of time. But because of a sudden flow of water, if sheet erosion happens, a large area may become infertile. So you can talk about that kind of effect as well. Now, how to deal with this cloudburst situation? Number one, can we preempt that? Can we create an early warning system where we can predict that seeing the particular formation of cloud? In cloudburst, generally we talk about nimbus or nimbus cloud. So can we create early warning system where we can predict the formation of cloud and guess or preempt that whether an event of cloudburst may happen in that area or not? So early warning system is something we should work upon. So in way forward or government initiatives, how to manage the disaster properly, we can talk about the early warning system there. Then different capacity building. You in disaster management questions always try to think from the perspective of disaster management cycle, that if disaster has happened, after that what we can do, rehabilitation or resettlement. Then before the disaster, we are preempting a disaster, what capacity building or mitigation strategies we can take, right? So capacity building to deal with events like cloudburst becomes very important here, right? So you can discuss about the capacity building part in the you can say way forward as well. So try to see disaster management life cycle and where you can fit in the capacity building part. You can draw the diagram and show also in this capacity building part we can create early warning system, or our framework should be proper framework should be there, which somehow relates to the Sendai framework as well. So you can take Sendai framework as a passing reference here as well, though it is not asked in the question, but in your answer you should mention these keywords or the framework names of these frameworks as well, right? So this was the pretty straightforward question. I hope you can attempt this one because very static, talk about the mechanism of cloudburst, talk about it different occurrence in different areas, some consequences, then some way forward, and then you provide two recent examples. You can take example of recent Amarnath cave cloudburst. You can take example of Karnataka Belgavi, I guess there in last year cloudburst event happened, and because of that flash flood situation arose there. So there are several examples. Even you can take an old example of Kedarnath cloudburst, which was a huge disaster at that period of time. So you can take example of that as well. So we have several examples of cloudburst. Here specifically they are asking about two recent examples. So I hope you can include that in your answer. Very straightforward question, right? Now let us see the next question from the disaster management section, which talks about explain the causes and effects of coastal erosion. Number one keyword causes, effects of coastal erosion in India. What are the available coastal management techniques for combating the hazard? Now coastal management or specifically talking about coastal erosion, how you should start this answer? Number one, in introduction, define coastal erosion. Talk about the major three reasons through which the coastal erosion happens. sea level rise, then powerful wave action, and third is the coastal flooding. Now, these three are the major reasons which you can even include in your introduction as well when you are defining what you understand by coastal erosion, and these are the major factors because of which coastal erosion happens. Now, come to the body part, directly you can jump to address the causes. Now, when you are addressing the causes part, you can divide the causes in two major sections. One is the natural causes, and the second is man-made or anthropogenic causes. Now, in natural causes, we can directly talk about action of breaking waves. So, you all know that when in sea surface, when waves arises and when it reaches towards the coast, there is a continental shelf there. So, if roughly I draw the continental shelf, this is the sea level. Now, this is the continental shelf I am talking about. So, because of this wave, it gets disturbed by the continental shelf and the amplitude of it increases, and when it reaches the coast, it creates a damage there. So, which eventually leads to coastal erosion. So, one natural cause will be the action of breaking waves, because these waves get broken down because of the continental shelf, and eventually it hits the coast, and coastal erosion happens because of these broken waves, right? Second, effect of severe cyclonic or storm situation. So, now recently you might have seen that different events of cyclones is being very prevalent, and because of that, if the storm is very high and when it hits the coast, the coastal ecosystem gets disturbed. Now, it depends whether we have mangrove forest there which can act as a buffer. If it is not there, definitely it directly impacts the coastal areas, right? So, that severe cyclones also can be reason for coastal erosion. Then rise in sea level, because of the water level is increasing, a lot of coast in the different part of the world may get submerged because of that sea level rise. Now, another important reason may be the tides. Because of tides, also coastal erosion happens. Now, you see, after discussing the natural part, we can talk about man-made or anthropogenic reasons. Now, if in a coastal area, if we are not able to manage the constructions properly, so because of hotel construction or restaurants construction, there can be mismanagement of that area. So, that is directly comes under the man-made reason, or it is anthropogenic reason. So, unplanned construction activity in the coastal region may lead to coastal erosion as well. Again, reduction of sediment supply due to damming of river. Now, in coastal areas, if you talk about delta or the estuary part where the sedimentation is very much required, right? Now, if there is mismatch or disbalance between the budget of that sediment, because of that also coastal erosion may happen. Now, why that can happen? Because we are creating dams on river and we are holding the river flow, natural river flow. So, again that may fall under the anthropogenic reason. So, basically what I am trying to say here is that whatever reasons you are identifying, break down into natural and man-made form. Then what is the effects of coastal erosion? Now directly you can talk about consequences, that because the community living in the coastal area, they totally depend upon, for their shelter, for their economic activity, depends upon the resources in coastal region. Now if the coastal erosion is happening, definitely they may lose their habitat. So it is again most of the because of climate change, you can see that sea level is rising and most of the islands are at risk of submergence, right? So the people who are residing, the community who are residing in the coastal regions, they are at a vulnerable state. So one of the major reason or consequence of coastal erosion is the direct impact on the people who are residing there. So that aspect you need to explore when you are writing about the consequences. Then there are coastal villages whose economy, livelihood of people totally depend upon the coastal ecosystem. Talk about fishing community. If there is coastal erosion, there are chances that the natural resource like fish or fishing activity may get impacted. So again, in consequence part, talk about direct impact on the habitat of people residing there, talk about impact on their livelihood, talk about impact on their social life. So all those aspects you can explore while you are discussing the consequences of coastal erosion. Now here, because of coastal erosion, why we are seeing them as hazard? It is not an event like the cloud burst we discussed, but still it is an ongoing process. So if you treat coastal erosion as a ongoing process, and that may lead to some negative consequences on the people residing there, so because of that it becomes hazard, because all the natural reasons which we have talked about, they are not created, right? It is a natural phenomena, but since we have encroached upon and we have created so many buildings, constructions, etc. in the beaches, now we are intruding with the natural process. Now even natural process of action of waves may seem to us as an hazard, because we already have encroached upon that boundary, right? So also you need to explore those dimensions as well whenever you are discussing not only this hazard but any other hazard, right? So what is the element anthropogenic reasons behind that? So after discussing the causes and consequence or effects, now you can talk about what are the coastal management techniques. Now to stop coastal erosion, there are majorly two approaches or techniques which we can identify. Number one is the hard engineering technique, and number two is the soft engineering technique. Hard engineering technique means create or construct sea walls. Suppose if you are constructing sea walls just to avoid the action of breaking waves. Now that kind of approach, hard engineering technique, are very difficult to implement, plus cost, it is not cost effective. So first you give different names of whatever hard engineering techniques we can use for coastal management. Number one would be sea walls, then number two gabions, number 3 groins, revetments. So these can be breakwaters. You can create structures, hard engineered structures to break the incoming water, so that it may not impact the coastal area. So these are some construction activity which we can do to protect our coastal regions. What are the soft techniques, soft engineering techniques? We can talk about beach nourishment. We can talk about the proper land management of the beaches, so that we prevent human activity going close towards the end of the beaches. So we can have coastal management. We have coastal regulation zone as well, where we defined that till what level we can construct any new buildings, or till what level we can renovate existing building. So those conditions already we have, so we can work on that. That is again a soft engineering technique. Marshland creation or focusing on having more mangrove forest in the coastal region, so that it can act as a buffer for any disasters like cyclone, which may eventually lead to coastal erosion, right? So these are few techniques you can identify, because in the second part they are specifically asking about coastal management techniques for combating the hazard. So segregate your points in hard engineering and soft engineering, give those points, briefly explain what it means, then you can talk about the issues while using hard engineering techniques and issues involving soft engineering techniques. Major issues you can identify in hard engineering techniques: it is cost, it is not cost effective, cost intensive, and it may take a lot of time to create those structures, and eventually those structures may not be very sustainable as well. But if you are focusing on proper beach management or creation of mangrove zone, so those may be sustainable and effective as well. So on those lines, you might have attempted this question. It is again a very direct question which directly focuses on a particular hazard, coastal erosion. So this year, both the question which came from disaster management were very static in nature and very much doable if you have prepared all the major hazards and its disaster management. If the issue happens, how we are going to deal with that disaster. Now in this year's paper, they have not focused much on that management part of it, but still they are talking about the core event and core techniques related to it, right? So comparing to previous year questions, disaster management questions were more of a static in nature. I hope this discussion will help you to get an idea that how to attempt these kind of questions. Thank you so much.